I walked in on my wife on our bed with her boss. "You're not man enough to leave," she smirked. I just packed my bag. When she tried to use her credit card the next day, the cashier cut it in half, right in front of her friends. You ever have one of those mornings where everything feels just a little too perfect? Like the universe is setting you up for some cosmic punchline? Yeah, that was me at exactly 7:47 a.m. on a Tuesday that started out innocent enough. I'd woken up early, hit the gym, crushed a decent workout, and even stopped by that overpriced coffee shop downtown where the baristas have more attitude than a reality TV reunion special. I got 2 coffees, one for me, black with just enough caffeine to jumpstart a small vehicle, and one for Melissa, my wife of 6 years, who couldn't function before noon without her caramel macchiato. No sugar, extra foam, stirred counterclockwise under a full moon, or whatever the hell her specific order was that week. I was feeling pretty good about myself, honestly. Generous husband bringing coffee home. Maybe we'd actually have a civil conversation for once instead of her usual passive-aggressive commentary about how I load the dishwasher wrong or breathe too loudly during her yoga podcasts. I walked up to our house, the house I'd been making mortgage payments on like a responsible adult, while she found herself through various expensive hobbies that lasted approximately 3 weeks each, and pushed open the front door with my elbow, both hands occupied with overpriced beverages that cost more than my first car payment. The house was quiet. Too quiet, actually, which should have been my first clue that something was cosmically wrong. Melissa usually had some awful meditation music playing or was on a conference call talking about synergy and paradigm shifts and other corporate buzzwords that mean absolutely nothing. But no, today there was just silence, thick and weird, like the air pressure before a tornado touches down and ruins everyone's weekend plans. I headed upstairs, thinking maybe she was still asleep, which would have been a minor miracle since she usually started her day at the crack of dawn, posting inspirational quotes on social media that she definitely didn't write herself. I reached our bedroom door, which was slightly ajar, and that's when I heard it, that unmistakable sound of movement, fabric rustling, and a man's voice that definitely wasn't coming from the TV. Now, I'm not a violent guy. I don't immediately jump to conclusions. I believe in rational thought, in taking a breath before reacting, and maybe considering that there's a perfectly logical explanation for why a dude's voice is coming from my bedroom at 8 in the morning on a random Tuesday. Maybe it's a plumber. Maybe she's watching some weird YouTube tutorial. Maybe I'm having a stroke and none of this is real. I pushed the door open with my foot, still holding those 2 coffees like an idiot. And that's when the universe delivered its punchline with all the subtlety of a sledgehammer to the face. There they were, Melissa and Harold. Harold, her boss. Harold, the guy who looked like he'd never done anything more exciting than organize his sock drawer by color and thread count. Harold, who wore khakis unironically and probably had a collection of commemorative coins from the Franklin Mint. Harold, whose entire personality could be summed up as aggressively beige. This man looked like he'd get winded walking to his mailbox, like his idea of living dangerously was adding pepper to his scrambled eggs, like he'd apologize to a chair if he bumped into it. And yet here he was, in my bed, with my wife, frozen like a deer in headlights except somehow even less dignified. His face went through about 17 different shades of panic, cycling from white to red to this weird purple color that made me genuinely concerned he might have a medical emergency right there on my 1,000 thread count sheets that I'd specifically bought because Melissa said they were essential for proper sleep hygiene. But Melissa? Oh, Melissa didn't freeze. Melissa didn't look embarrassed or guilty or even remotely apologetic. No, this woman had the audacity to smirk. Actually smirk, like she'd just pulled off some clever magic trick instead of nuking our entire marriage from orbit. She flipped her hair, that calculated, practiced hair flip she'd probably rehearsed in the mirror 1,000 times, and looked me dead in the eye with the kind of confidence usually reserved for people who've actually accomplished something meaningful in life. "You're not man enough to leave," she said, her voice dripping with the kind of condescension you'd use on a confused toddler. Let that sink in for a second. I'm standing there, coffees in hand, watching my wife in bed with her boss who collects model trains or stamps or whatever boring suburban dad hobby he's into. And she's the one throwing shade at me. This woman, who once called me crying because she couldn't figure out how to parallel park in a spot the size of a shipping container, was questioning my manhood. This woman, who needed my help opening pickle jars, who made me kill spiders, who couldn't change a tire if her life depended on it, was really out here acting like I was the inadequate one in this situation. The silence that followed was deafening. Harold looked like he wanted the mattress to swallow him whole. I could practically hear his internal monologue spiraling into full panic mode, probably running through HR protocols and divorce attorney fees, and whether his own wife was going to murder him with his commemorative golf club set. But me? I didn't shout. I didn't throw the coffees, though honestly, the thought crossed my mind because scalding hot caramel macchiato to the face seemed like appropriate karma. I didn't cry or beg or ask, "How could you do this to me?" like some movie cliché. I just stood there for a second, letting the absurdity of the situation wash over me like a wave of pure, concentrated, what the actual hell. Then I walked over to the dresser, set her coffee down gently, because I'm not wasteful, and also because some petty part of me wanted her to see that caramel macchiato sitting there getting cold while her life imploded, and looked at both of them with the calmest expression I could manage. "Well, at least you're consistent," I said, my voice steady and weirdly casual, like we were discussing the weather. "You always liked overqualified men." Harold's face somehow got even more purple. Melissa's smirk faltered for just a second, that micro-expression of uncertainty flashing across her face before she could get her mask back in place. I didn't wait for a response. I turned around, walked to the closet, and grabbed my overnight bag, the one I kept packed for business trips, which turned out to be cosmically convenient. I tossed in my laptop, charger, a couple changes of clothes, my good headphones, and the bottle of decent scotch I'd been saving for a special occasion. If this didn't qualify as special, nothing did. The whole time, neither of them said a word. Harold looked like he was contemplating whether he could fit through the bedroom window. Melissa just watched me with this weird expression, like she was simultaneously surprised and annoyed that I wasn't playing my part in whatever drama she'd scripted in her head. I zipped up the bag, slung it over my shoulder, grabbed my coffee, the black one, because I wasn't leaving behind perfectly good caffeine, and headed for the door. I stopped in the doorway, took one last look at the scene, and felt something shift inside me. Not heartbreak, not rage, just this crystalline clarity that comes when you finally see someone for exactly who they are instead of who you hoped they'd be. No tears, no screaming, no begging her to explain or asking what Harold had that I didn't, because honestly, I didn't care. I just walked out of that bedroom, down the stairs, out the front door, and into my car with the quiet confidence of a man who'd just been handed the world's most obvious exit sign. As I pulled out of the driveway, I glanced in the rearview mirror at the house, that overpriced suburban box that I'd been slowly suffocating in for years, and smiled. Not a bitter smile, not a sad smile, but the kind of smile that comes when you realize the trash just took itself out. Melissa thought she'd won. She thought calling me not man enough would crush me, would make me stay and fight for her or grovel or whatever she expected. But she'd miscalculated badly, because I wasn't interested in winning anymore. I was interested in revenge. The kind of revenge that doesn't involve shouting or violence or anything dramatic. No, I was going to make karma my full-time side hustle, and business was about to be very, very good. I sat in my car outside the house for a solid minute, maybe two, engine running, coffee getting cold in the cup holder, just staring at the steering wheel like it held the answers to life's biggest questions. But I wasn't sitting there because I was broken or devastated or going through some emotional crisis that required a good cry and a pint of ice cream. Nope. I was calculating, running numbers, processing data, doing what I do best, which is turning chaos into spreadsheets and spreadsheets into actionable plans. See, here's what Melissa fundamentally misunderstood about me, about us, about this entire situation she'd orchestrated with all the grace of a drunk giraffe on roller skates. She thought she'd won. She actually believed that her little performance back there, the smirk, the hair flip, that devastating one-liner about me not being man enough to leave, was some kind of checkmate move. Like I'd just crumble under the weight of her rejection, curl up in a ball somewhere, and spend the next 6 months eating cereal for dinner while listening to sad Coldplay songs and wondering where it all went wrong. What she forgot, in her infinite wisdom and careful planning, was that I work in risk management. That's literally my job. I spend 40-plus hours a week analyzing potential disasters, quantifying uncertainty, and developing contingency plans for scenarios that most people don't even want to think about. I don't lose at things. I restructure them. I pivot. I adapt. I turn liabilities into assets and problems into opportunities, and right now, Melissa had just become the biggest risk in my portfolio that needed immediate mitigation. While she'd been busy networking her way up the corporate ladder, and apparently horizontally into her boss's bed, I'd been quietly, methodically, almost boringly responsible. I knew every account we had, every password, every automatic payment, every investment, every subscription service she'd signed up for during her various phases of self-discovery. I knew where the money came from, where it went, and exactly how much leverage I had in this situation. And buddy, I had a lot of leverage. I pulled out my phone, opened my banking app, and started the process that would later be known in my personal history as the Great Financial Uncoupling. First things first, paycheck rerouting. My direct deposit had been going into our joint account for years, which in retrospect was about as smart as leaving your wallet on a park bench in downtown anywhere. 3 taps, 1 verification code, and boom, my paychecks were now heading to a brand new account that had exactly one name on it, and that name sure as hell wasn't Melissa. Next up, investments. We had a modest portfolio. Nothing crazy, but enough that it mattered. Stocks, bonds, a couple of ETFs that I'd carefully researched while she was busy buying decorative pillows that cost more than my monthly car payment. I'd set up most of these accounts myself, which meant I had the admin access, which meant I could isolate my contributions from hers faster than she could say, wait, what's happening to my retirement fund? Then came the passwords. Oh, the passwords. This was almost therapeutic, honestly. Every streaming service, every utility account, every subscription box she'd signed up for and forgotten about. Netflix, Hulu, Spotify, that weird organic vegetable delivery service she used exactly twice before declaring vegetables too earthy. The meditation app she never opened, the online yoga classes she never attended. Click, click, click. Password changed. Password changed. Password changed. It was like digital bubble wrap, and I was popping every single bubble with methodical precision. I even went into our shared calendar. Yes, we had a shared calendar because Melissa insisted we needed to coordinate our lives, like we were running a small corporation instead of just being married, and deleted myself from every event. Every dinner party with her boring friends who talked about property values and kitchen renovations. Every brunch. Every couple's game night where I had to pretend to enjoy charades with people who peaked in high school. Gone. All of it. Deleted. My schedule was now gloriously empty except for things I actually wanted to do. But here's where it gets good. Here's where I really started to enjoy myself. I called my buddy Ray, who happens to be a divorce attorney, and not just any divorce attorney, but the kind who charges $600 an hour and has a reputation for absolutely demolishing opposing counsel in court. Ray and I went to college together, back when we were both younger and dumber, and thought we'd change the world through the power of fraternity brotherhood and really bad beer. Now he changes lives through the power of litigation and really good whiskey, which is actually what I pay him in because Ray values quality bourbon more than he values money, and I respect that about him. He picked up on the second ring. Dennis, it's 8 in the morning. Someone better be dead, or you better be calling to tell me you finally left that nightmare of a marriage. Funny you should mention that, I said, pulling out of the neighborhood and heading toward literally anywhere else. Hypothetically speaking, if a man were to discover his wife in bed with her boss. Oh, thank God, Ray interrupted, and I could hear the smile in his voice. Finally, I've been waiting for this call for like 3 years. What do you need? Hypothetically, I continued, because I was enjoying this. How fast could said man turn his wife's credit card into a decorative coaster? Ray laughed, that deep belly laugh he saves for really good courtroom victories and really bad defendant decisions. By morning, if you've got good Wi-Fi, which I assume you do because you're the most aggressively prepared person I know. You've probably already changed half the passwords, haven't you? 3/4, actually. I was thorough. That's my boy. Listen, are you somewhere safe? Somewhere she can't show up and cause a scene. About to be. I'm thinking a motel. Something cheap and anonymous where I can set up my laptop and really dig into the financial excavation. Perfect. Go do that. Get settled. Then call me back and we'll talk strategy. And Dennis, congratulations on finally growing a spine. I was starting to worry about you. I hung up feeling lighter than I had in months, maybe years. There's something clarifying about burning bridges, about watching your old life in the rearview mirror and knowing you're never going back. It's terrifying, sure, but it's also weirdly liberating, like finally taking off shoes that have been too tight for way too long. I found a motel about 20 minutes outside of town. One of those places that's seen better days, but is clean enough and cheap enough, and asks exactly 0 questions when you show up at 9 in the morning with an overnight bag and a look that says, "Don't ask." The guy at the front desk barely looked up from his phone as he handed me a key to room 147, which was on the 2nd floor overlooking a parking lot that had seen more drama than a reality TV show. The room was exactly what you'd expect. Generic beige walls, a bed that had probably seen things I didn't want to think about, a TV from approximately 2003, and Wi-Fi that was surprisingly decent. I set up my laptop on the desk, plugged in my phone, and cracked open a can of soda from the vending machine outside. It was warm and flat, and tasted like carbonated disappointment, but I raised it anyway in a solo toast to freedom. To new beginnings, I said to the empty room, and to Melissa's credit score, which is about to take a dive steeper than her moral standards. The soda tasted a little better after that. Funny how perspective works. I spent the next 2 hours on my laptop, coffee going cold beside me, diving into every financial connection Melissa and I had ever made. It was like performing surgery, except instead of removing a tumor, I was removing a whole entire person from my financial ecosystem. Every shared expense, every joint account, every place where our money touched. I systematically separated them with the precision of someone who'd been mentally preparing for this moment longer than I'd realized. By noon, I created a fortress. My money was mine. Her access was gone. The accounts were locked down tighter than Fort Knox, and I had documentation for everything because I'm not an idiot and I know how divorce court works. I leaned back in the genuinely uncomfortable motel chair, looked at my spreadsheet of completed tasks, and smiled. Melissa thought she'd broken me this morning. She thought she'd destroyed me with her little power play, her rehearsed line, her casual cruelty. But she'd actually just freed me. And now I was about to show her exactly what a man, not man enough to leave, could do when properly motivated. This was going to be fun. By sunrise, Melissa was probably rolling over in our bed. Well, her bed now, I guess, thinking about how her day was going to go. She was probably imagining me somewhere pathetic, maybe at my brother's place or crashed on a buddy's couch, crying into a pillow like some character from a daytime soap opera who just discovered his wife was actually his evil twin sister or whatever insane plot twist those shows come up with. She probably pictured me devastated, broken, maybe even crawling back with apologies and promises to be more of a man or whatever impossible standard she'd conjured up in her delusional little fantasy world. Wrong. So completely, utterly, catastrophically wrong. I was in full stealth mode, baby. Laptop open on that questionable motel desk, spreadsheets glowing on my screen like Christmas lights in July, illuminating my face with the warm glow of financial justice. I'd slept maybe 4 hours, but it was that good kind of sleep, the kind you get when you know you're doing the right thing and the universe is finally on your side. I'd woken up at 5:30, grabbed the world's worst motel coffee from the lobby. Seriously, it tasted like someone filtered it through an old sock, and gotten straight to work on what I was now calling Operation Ghost Mode. The name was perfect because that's exactly what I was doing. Disappearing from Melissa's financial life so completely and thoroughly that she'd think I was never there in the first place. Every account she loved, every credit card she swiped without thinking, every automatic payment that made her life convenient and easy, poof, gone. Vanished into thin air like a magic trick, except instead of pulling a rabbit out of a hat, I was pulling my entire financial existence out of her reality. First order of business, her beloved shopping card. Oh man, this thing was legendary. Melissa treated this credit card like it was a constitutional right, like the founding fathers had specifically included the right to unlimited online shopping somewhere in the Bill of Rights between freedom of speech and the right to bear arms. This card had seen more action than a military special ops unit. Nordstrom, Saks, that one boutique downtown where a t-shirt costs $300 because it's ethically sourced, or whatever. She'd hit them all with the enthusiasm of someone who didn't actually have to pay the bills. I logged into the account. Password still unchanged because she'd never bothered to learn it. always just asked me to handle the boring money stuff, and stared at the cancellation button for a good 10 seconds. Not because I was hesitating, but because I wanted to savor this moment. This was going to be beautiful. Click. Are you sure you want to cancel this card? Yes. Yes, I'm sure. I am more sure about this than I've been about anything in my entire life. Card cancellation processed. Please allow 24 to 48 hours for. I didn't even finish reading it. Next. Her emergency fund. Oh, this was rich. Melissa had insisted we needed an emergency fund, which was actually responsible and mature and one of the few good ideas she'd had in recent years. Except she had a very loose definition of emergency. New shoes because the ones she bought last month were so last season. Emergency. A spa day because work was stressful. Emergency. That time she decided she needed a $400 blender to make smoothies she never made. You guessed it, emergency. I transferred every penny out of that account and into a new one she didn't have access to. The transfer went through with a satisfying little ding sound that I swear sounded like angel choirs singing the Hallelujah chorus. Balance, 0. Melissa's emergency fund had just experienced its own emergency, and there was no bailout coming. Then came the gym membership, which was honestly just funny at this point. Melissa had signed up for this ultra-expensive boutique fitness place, the kind where they give you branded water bottles, and the instructors all look like they're carved from marble and survive solely on protein powder and positive affirmations. She'd gone exactly 4 times in 6 months, but she kept the membership because she liked posting gym selfies on Instagram to maintain the illusion that she was really getting into fitness. I found the auto-renewal payment buried in our joint account transactions and set it to decline. Future Melissa was going to show up for one of her rare workouts, scan her membership card, and get that beautiful, devastating membership expired message. I could practically hear the conversation with the front desk already. Chef's kiss. Perfection. But wait, there's more. Because I'm nothing if not thorough, I went after the utilities next. Now, this was strategic genius if I do say so myself. See, all the utilities, electricity, water, gas, internet, trash, that weird sewer fee that nobody understands but everyone pays, they were all in my name. Every single one. Because when we'd moved in, Melissa had been too busy with work to deal with the administrative headache of setting up accounts, so Muggins here had handled all of it. Well, guess what? I transferred every single utility into her name. Electric company? Here you go. Melissa, congratulations on your new account. Water? All yours, babe. Internet provider? Enjoy dealing with their customer service, which I'm pretty sure is actually a circle of hell that Dante forgot to mention. I even included a little note in the transfer requests, account holder relocating. Please update all billing and service information to Melissa Chun. The beauty of this move was multi-layered. Not only was she now responsible for paying all these bills herself, bills she probably didn't even know the amounts of because I'd always handled them, but she'd also have to deal with the absolute nightmare of confirming her identity, setting up new payment methods, and navigating the bureaucratic hellscape that is utility company customer service. If that doesn't build character, I don't know what does. I sat back, cracked my knuckles, and admired my handiwork. My spreadsheet was now color-coded, green for completed tasks, yellow for pending, red for things that required Ray's legal expertise. There was a lot of green, a very satisfying amount of green, but I wasn't done yet. Oh no, because Dennis Chin doesn't just burn bridges, he burns them creatively, with style, with a certain artistic flair that really elevates the whole bridge-burning experience. I grabbed an envelope from my bag. I keep supplies like this around because, again, I'm thorough, and wrote one word on a piece of paper in my neatest handwriting. Tomorrow. That's it. Just tomorrow. No explanation, no context, no hint about what tomorrow meant or what she should expect. Just a single word designed to do one thing. Make her think. Make her wonder. Make her anxious. It was a psychological thriller trailer, a teaser for the chaos to come, a breadcrumb leading to absolutely nowhere and everywhere all at once. I sealed the envelope, addressed it to Melissa, and made a mental note to swing by the house later when I knew she'd be at work. I'd slip it into her makeup drawer, the one she checked every single morning as part of her elaborate beauty routine, right between her $40 face serum and that jade roller thing she bought after watching one YouTube video. She'd find it tomorrow morning, pre-coffee, probably still groggy, and she'd open it expecting maybe an apology or a love letter or some desperate plea for reconciliation. Instead, she'd get one word. One cryptic, unsettling, perfectly vague word that would sit in her brain all day like a splinter she couldn't remove. I could already imagine her spiraling. What does tomorrow mean? Tomorrow what? Is he doing something tomorrow? Is something happening tomorrow? Should I be worried? Is this a threat? Is this a promise? What does it mean? The answer, of course, was that it meant whatever she decided it meant. The beauty of ambiguity is that people fill in the blanks themselves, usually with scenarios way worse than reality. Melissa's imagination would torture her far more effectively than any specific threat I could make. I smiled at my laptop screen, saved all my spreadsheets with appropriately dramatic file names, Operation Freedom, The Reckoning, Melissa's Very Bad Day, and closed the laptop with a satisfying click. Tomorrow, Melissa would find that envelope. Tomorrow, her carefully constructed life would start showing cracks. Tomorrow, she'd begin to understand that the man she'd dismissed as not man enough to leave had actually left so thoroughly, so completely, that she'd be finding evidence of his departure for weeks. But today I was going to enjoy another cup of terrible motel coffee, maybe catch up on some work emails, and bask in the warm glow of a plan coming together beautifully. Some people meditate. Some people journal. I financially dismantle my enemies with spreadsheets and strategic account closures. Potato, potato. Meanwhile, across town in what used to be our shared bedroom, Melissa was waking up like an absolute queen. I wasn't there to witness it, obviously, but I knew her routine well enough to paint the picture perfectly. She probably stretched luxuriously in bed, checked her phone to see if I'd sent any pathetic begging texts. Spoiler alert, I hadn't, and smiled to herself thinking about how her little performance yesterday had completely destroyed me. In her mind, I was probably devastated, broken, possibly even reconsidering my entire existence while she, the victor, the one who'd had the courage to follow her heart, or whatever nonsense she'd tell herself to justify sleeping with her boss, was about to have a fabulous day. She probably took extra time getting ready, picking out an outfit that screamed, "I'm thriving after dumping my loser husband," doing her makeup with the precision of someone preparing for war, and taking approximately 47 selfies before finding one that was Instagram-worthy. Because that's who Melissa was. A woman who measured her self-worth in likes and comments from people she barely knew and definitely didn't like. By 10 o'clock, she'd mobilized the troops. And by troops, I mean her brunch squad. Sabrina, Tina, and Lola, 3 professional gossip influencers who treated mimosas like a religious sacrament and lived for drama the way plants live for sunlight. These women could turn a minor disagreement about parking into a 3-hour discussion complete with sides, alliances, and social media posts that required content warnings. They were exhausting on their best days and absolutely insufferable on their worst, and I'd spent 6 years smiling politely through their conversations about things like Mercury retrograde and toxic positivity while dying inside. I could picture them meeting up, probably at some trendy brunch spot where avocado toast costs $18 and comes with a side of pretension, all air kisses and squeals, and, "Oh my God, you look amazing," even though they'd literally seen each other 2 days ago. Melissa would have led with the big news, of course, because subtlety wasn't exactly her strong suit. So I finally got rid of Dennis. She probably announced, flipping her hair with that practiced move she thought made her look sophisticated, but actually made her look like she was trying to dislodge a bee from her ear. And her friends, being the absolutely stellar human beings they were, probably gasped and clutched their mimosas and said things like, "You're so brave, and you deserve better," and "I never liked him anyway." Even though Tina had literally tried to set me up with her sister last year before Melissa shut that down real quick. They'd spent an hour over overpriced eggs and undercooked bacon, dissecting my supposed failures as a husband. Too boring, too responsible, too obsessed with financial planning and having a stable future. The absolute nerve of me, trying to be a functioning adult. Melissa probably painted herself as this trapped bird finally freed from her cage, soaring into a new life of excitement and passion with Harold, who was definitely going to leave his wife for her, because that always works out exactly as planned, right? After brunch, because Melissa's idea of processing emotions involved maxing out credit cards, they decided to go shopping. Retail therapy, they called it, as if buying things you don't need with money you don't have is somehow medicinal. They headed to one of those expensive boutiques downtown. You know the type, where the mannequins look like they're personally judging your credit score, and the sales associates follow you around like you're about to stuff a purse down your pants. This particular store was the kind of place where they served champagne while you shopped, because apparently purchasing a $300 scarf requires alcohol to make it seem reasonable. The lighting was all soft and flattering, designed to make you think you look better than you actually do, so you'll buy more things. Classical music played at just the right volume to make you feel sophisticated and wealthy, even if you're neither of those things. Melissa and her squad swept through that store like a swarm of well-dressed locusts, pulling things off racks, holding them up to the light, debating whether burgundy or maroon was more on trend this season, as if there was a meaningful difference. Sabrina found a jacket. Tina found some jeans that cost more than my first laptop. Lola found a hat that she absolutely didn't need, but claimed spoke to her soul. And then Melissa, she spotted them. The shoes. A pair of designer heels that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, sitting on a pedestal like they were holy relics instead of overpriced leather and rubber. They were ridiculous, honestly, the kind of shoes that you can't actually walk in, that exist purely to make a statement, and that statement is, I have more money than sense. She picked them up with the reverence usually reserved for newborn babies or priceless artifacts, turning them over in her hands, checking the label, probably calculating in her head how many Instagram posts she could get out of these bad boys. Her eyes lit up with that special gleam she got when she was about to spend a truly unreasonable amount of money. These, she announced to her assembled court of enablers, will make my ex regret everything. Because that's how her brain worked. Shoes weren't about comfort or even really about fashion. They were weapons in some imaginary war where she proved her worth by accumulating expensive objects. She genuinely believed that me seeing her in $900 heels would somehow make me collapse in regret, begging for another chance, realizing what I'd lost. She strutted up to the counter. Well, as much as anyone can strut while carrying shoes they haven't bought yet, and placed them down with a flourish that suggested she was making a power move instead of just purchasing footwear. The sales associate, bless her heart, probably saw this exact scene play out 17 times a day and had long since stopped being impressed by any of it. I'll take these, Melissa declared, already pulling out the black card. The American Express that had seen more action than a Hollywood stunt double. The card that had funded countless shopping sprees, impromptu spa days, and purchases that seemed essential at the time but ended up in the back of the closet 3 weeks later. She handed it over with the confidence of someone who'd never been declined in her life, probably already composing the Instagram caption in her head. Something about treating yourself and new beginnings and living your best life, with approximately 47 hashtags. The cashier took the card, smiled that professional retail smile, and swiped it through the machine. There was a pause, just a brief moment where the universe held its breath, and then the most beautiful sound in the world, the rejection beep. The cashier said, her professional smile flickering slightly. Let me try that again. She ran it through a second time. Same beep. Same rejection. Same beautiful, poetic justice. Melissa laughed, because of course she did. This had to be a mistake. A technical glitch. Mercury in retrograde, or whatever cosmic excuse she'd come up with. The machine must be broken, she said, her voice just a tiny bit less confident than before. Just run it again. Third time. Same result. The beep echoed through that overpriced boutique like a death knell, like a church bell tolling for Melissa's credit limit, like the universe itself saying, not today, Satan. The cashier's smile was now completely gone, replaced with that look of professional discomfort that retail workers get when they have to deliver bad news. She leaned in slightly and said, in a voice that was trying to be quiet, but definitely wasn't quiet enough, "Ma'am, the card has been declined." You could have heard a pin drop. Actually, you could have heard a feather drop. You could have heard a thought drop. The entire store went silent, like someone had hit pause on reality. Melissa's face went through several distinct phases in rapid succession. First was confusion. Surely this was a mistake. Then came embarrassment. People were looking. Then arrived anger. How dare this card betray her? And finally, desperately, denial kicked in hard. That's impossible, she said, her voice climbing half an octave. Run it again. The cashier, God bless her, did run it again. Fourth time's the charm, right? Wrong. Same beep. Same decline. Same cosmic justice. And this is where it gets truly beautiful. The cashier reached under the counter and pulled out scissors. Actual scissors. The kind you use in kindergarten for arts and crafts. Except these were about to create a masterpiece of a different kind. I'm sorry, ma'am, she said, not sounding particularly sorry at all. But when a card is declined multiple times, we're required to terminate it. She took those scissors, positioned them right in the middle of that Black American Express card, and, snip, cut it clean in half. The sound echoed through that boutique like a gunshot. Melissa just stood there, frozen, watching the two halves of her beloved credit card fall onto the counter like the broken dreams they represented. The account's been terminated, the cashier added, probably just to twist the knife a little, because retail workers are human too and they enjoy schadenfreude like the rest of us. Melissa's friends had gone completely silent. Sabrina was suddenly very interested in her phone. Tina whispered, "Oof," under her breath, which was honestly the most honest thing any of them had said all day. Lola had physically taken a step back, creating distance like bad credit might be contagious. Melissa stood there at that counter, holding $900 shoes she couldn't buy, staring at her bisected credit card, blinking rapidly like Windows trying to process an error message it had never encountered before. Somewhere across town, sitting in a questionable motel room with terrible coffee and excellent Wi-Fi, I smiled. The decline heard around the mall. Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. While Melissa was experiencing what I can only imagine was the most humiliating moment of her adult life. Watching her credit card get ceremonially executed in front of her judgy friends and a sales associate who'd probably dine out on this story for months. I was sitting in a cafe about 3 miles away, sipping the cheapest Americano on the menu and organizing what I'd started calling the masterpiece. And let me tell you, this masterpiece was coming together more beautifully than anything in the Louvre, except instead of oil paints and canvas, I was working with spreadsheets and financial documents. And instead of creating art for the ages, I was creating chaos for one very specific person who absolutely deserved it. The cafe was one of those local joints that hadn't been gentrified yet. No exposed brick, no Edison bulbs, no chalkboard menu written in unnecessarily complicated cursive. Just honest-to-God coffee, reasonably priced, served by a guy named Pete who didn't ask questions when you showed up at 11 in the morning with a laptop and the kind of smile that suggested you were up to something. Pete was good people. Pete understood that sometimes a man just needs caffeine and Wi-Fi and to be left alone to financially dismantle his life. I'd set up shop at a corner table with a view of the door, old habits from too many business meetings where you learn to always know your exits, and spread out my operation across 3 browser windows and approximately 17 tabs. On my left screen, bank accounts, investment portfolios, and asset lists. On my right, legal documents, email drafts, and a very satisfying checklist that was getting more check marks by the hour. In the middle, a running tally of everything I was removing from Melissa's access, which was growing longer than a CVS receipt. Let's talk about those shared accounts for a minute, because this is where it gets really good. See, over 6 years of marriage, Melissa and I had accumulated what financial advisors call entanglements, joint accounts, shared credit cards, co-signed loans, all the financial equivalent of tying 2 people together with really complicated knots. Most couples build these connections slowly, over time, as a sign of trust and commitment and partnership. We'd done the same thing, except now I was untying every single knot with the speed and efficiency of a sailor who'd just spotted an iceberg. I'd already killed the main credit card. That beautiful moment was probably happening right about now, actually, which made my coffee taste even better. But there were others. So many others. Melissa had what I called a plastic portfolio. Multiple cards for different purposes, all linked to accounts that I'd set up because she didn't have time to deal with financial stuff. There was the travel card, the gas card, the grocery card, the emergency card that she used for non-emergencies approximately 90% of the time. Gone. All of them. Canceled. Terminated. Sent to the great credit card graveyard in the sky, where they could finally rest after years of abuse. I clicked through each cancellation confirmation with the satisfaction of someone checking items off a bucket list. Cancel account? Yes. Are you sure? Absolutely. This action cannot be undone. Perfect. That's the whole point. Then I moved on to what I'd been calling her beauty loan, which was actually just a personal line of credit she'd taken out last year to fund her sudden decision that she needed Botox, fillers, laser treatments, and some kind of fancy facial that involved gold flakes, because apparently regular facials weren't cutting it anymore. She'd promised she'd pay it back herself with her bonus, a bonus that never materialized because, surprise, surprise, sleeping with your boss doesn't actually improve your work performance. It just makes things awkward in quarterly review meetings. This loan was technically in both our names, which meant I was on the hook for it legally, which meant I had every right to do what I was about to do. I logged into the account, verified my identity through approximately 47 security questions: mother's maiden name, first pet, street you grew up on, your favorite existential crisis, and then transferred the entire balance into a trust account that I'd set up that morning. A trust account that had exactly one name on it, Dennis Chin. The beauty of this move was multifaceted, like a diamond, except instead of being pretty, it was just strategically devastating. First, the loan was now being paid off from an account she couldn't access, which meant she couldn't make payments on it even if she wanted to, which she definitely didn't because Melissa had never met a financial obligation she didn't try to avoid. Second, this would create a paper trail showing that I'd taken responsibility for debt that benefited primarily her, which would look fantastic in divorce proceedings. Third, and most importantly, it meant that every dollar that went toward paying off her cosmetic procedures was coming from my controlled assets, which I could later claim as part of the settlement. I was essentially turning her vanity into legal ammunition. Poetry in motion, really. Next up on my hit list was Amazon Prime. And okay, I'll admit this one was just pure pettiness. But sometimes pettiness is its own reward, you know? Melissa was one of those people who ordered from Amazon like it was a competitive sport. Middle of the night, can't sleep, might as well order 17 things you don't need and won't remember purchasing until they show up on the doorstep 3 days later. She had it down to a science. See something, want it, click, bought, dopamine hit achieved, move on with life. She ordered everything through Prime. Clothes, gadgets, books she'd never read, kitchen tools she'd never use, organizational systems for a life she'd never organize, self-help books about becoming a better person that she'd clearly never opened. The woman had Amazon Prime the way some people have a caffeine addiction. It was woven into the fabric of her daily existence. I found the subscription in our shared account settings. Annual membership, auto-renewal, paid in full every year without her even thinking about it because I'd set it up to autopay from our joint checking account. The joint checking account that no longer existed, at least not in any form she could access. I hovered my mouse over the cancel subscription button and took a moment to really savor this. This wasn't just about the money. The annual fee was like $150, basically nothing in the grand scheme of things. This was about watching Melissa try to order something at 2 in the morning and discovering that she no longer had Prime shipping. This was about her cart full of impulse purchases sitting there, mocking her, asking for an additional shipping fee that she'd have to pay because her credit cards were all dead. Click. Your Prime membership will expire on. Beautiful. Chef's kiss. No notes. I leaned back in my chair, took a long sip of my Americano, which had gone lukewarm, but I didn't even care because the taste of victory overpowered any coffee-related disappointment, and surveyed my digital handiwork. In the span of about 48 hours, I'd systematically removed Melissa from every financial system we'd shared. Every account closed or transferred. Every card canceled. Every automatic payment rerouted or terminated. Every convenience eliminated. I'd even, and this is where my attention to detail really shined, canceled our shared subscription to that meal kit delivery service she'd signed up for 6 months ago and used exactly twice before deciding that cooking was too time-consuming. Even though the meals were literally pre-portioned and came with instructions that a kindergartner could follow. That subscription was set to renew next week. Not anymore. She was going to have to figure out dinner like a regular person. The horror. My phone buzzed. A text from Ray. How's the dismantling going? I sent back a screenshot of my checklist, which was now about 80% check marks. His response was immediate. You beautiful, petty bastard. I'm proud of you. I smiled at my phone, then opened up a new email draft addressed to Ray's official work address. Time to make this official. Time to give him the green light for the legal separation paperwork, the documents that would transform this from a personal vendetta into a court-recognized dissolution of marriage. I typed out the email with the kind of professional clarity that comes from years of writing business correspondence, except this was the most important business correspondence of my life. Subject line: proceeding with separation, all documentation ready. Body: a brief summary of the situation, confirmation that I had evidence, documentation, and financial records prepared, and a request to move forward with filing as soon as legally possible. I attached 17 files. Bank statements, account closures, photographs from the private investigator that I hadn't mentioned to anyone yet because I like keeping surprises in reserve, and a detailed timeline of events. Everything Ray would need to build a case so airtight that Melissa's theoretical future lawyer would take one look at it and advise her to settle immediately. I read through the email once, twice, 3 times, making sure every detail was perfect, every attachment correctly labeled, every statement factual and verifiable. Then I moved my cursor to the send button and paused for just a moment. This was it, the point of no return. Once I sent this email, the legal machinery would start turning, and there would be no stopping it. Divorce papers would be filed. Court dates would be scheduled. Our marriage would officially, legally, terminally end. I thought about Melissa, probably still at that boutique or maybe already rage texting her friends about the credit card incident, completely unaware that her bad day was about to become a bad week, a bad month, possibly a bad year. I thought about Harold, sweating in his office, probably wondering if his wife had found out yet, probably drafting his own exit strategy. I thought about the last 6 years, all the moments both good and bad that had led to me sitting in a discount cafe, planning the most thorough financial divorce in recent history. And then I clicked send. The email whooshed into the digital void, carrying with it the official end of my marriage and the unofficial beginning of Melissa's very bad time. I closed my laptop, finished my lukewarm Americano in one long gulp, and stood up. Pete gave me a nod from behind the counter. "Good day," he asked. "Getting better by the minute," I replied. And I meant it. According to Ray's assistant, a wonderful woman named Patricia who'd seen more marital drama than a Bravo TV producer and had the deadpan delivery to prove it, Melissa tried calling me 12 times that afternoon. 12. Not once or twice in a moment of panic, but 12 separate, increasingly desperate attempts to reach me, like somehow the 13th call would be the magic number that made me answer. She started at 2:47 p.m., right around the time she probably got home from her catastrophic shopping trip and started piecing together that something was very, very wrong with her financial situation. I didn't pick up. Not once. Not even to hear her squirm, though I'll admit I was tempted because I'm only human and schadenfreude is a powerful drug. But no, I let every single call go straight to voicemail, watching my phone light up with her name over and over again like some kind of sad, pathetic lighthouse beacon signaling a sinking ship. Each time it rang, I felt a little more validated in my choices. Each time it went to voicemail, I took another sip of decent whiskey I'd picked up to celebrate my newfound freedom. The voicemails she left were absolutely spectacular, by the way. Patricia, bless her heart, had somehow gotten copies. Don't ask me how. The woman has skills that probably aren't entirely legal, but are definitely appreciated. And she'd sent them over in a zip file with the subject line "Entertainment for your evening." I opened that file like it was Christmas morning, poured myself another drink, and settled in for what I knew was going to be a masterclass in escalating panic. Voicemail number 1, left at 2:47 p.m. "Dennis, this isn't funny. My card got declined today, and I know you did something. Call me back." Her voice was annoyed but controlled, still maintaining that superior tone she always used when she thought she had the upper hand. She genuinely believed this was just some temporary glitch, some minor inconvenience that I'd fix as soon as she demanded it. Voicemail number 3, 3:15 p.m. "Dennis, seriously, what did you do? I can't access any of our accounts. This is ridiculous. Call me back now." Now we were getting somewhere. The control was slipping. The annoyance was upgrading to anger. She'd clearly spent the last 28 minutes trying to log into various accounts and discovering that all her passwords had mysteriously stopped working. Voicemail number 5, 4:02 p.m. "I don't know what kind of childish game you're playing, but this needs to stop. I have bills to pay. This is financial abuse, Dennis. Do you understand that? I could sue you for this. Oh, the irony. The absolutely delicious irony of Melissa, who'd spent 6 years treating our joint accounts like her personal piggy bank, accusing me of financial abuse. I laughed so hard I almost spilled my whiskey. Voicemail number 7, 5:33 p.m. Please just call me back. We can talk about this. I know you're upset about yesterday, but this is too far. Way too far. Just, please call me. And there it was, the first crack in the facade. The please that suggested she was finally starting to understand that this wasn't a game, wasn't a temporary tantrum, wasn't something she could fix with a hair flip and a well-timed apology. Voicemail number 9, 7:18 p.m., just crying. No words, just the sound of someone having a full emotional breakdown into their phone. Normally, I'd feel bad about making another person cry, because I'm not actually a monster despite what this whole situation might suggest. But this was Melissa, the woman who'd looked me in the eye yesterday and told me I wasn't man enough to leave while actively cheating on me. My sympathy reserves were completely tapped out. Voicemail number 12, 10:47 p.m. You petty, heartless accountant. I hope you're happy with yourself. You've ruined everything. Everything. She was screaming now, full volume, probably red in the face, definitely scaring any neighbors who happened to be within earshot. And there was that beautiful insult, calling me an accountant like it was the worst thing she could think of. For context, and I feel like this is important to clarify, I'm not an accountant. I'm a financial analyst, which is a completely different profession that requires different skills and education and comes with a different job description. But more importantly, even if I were an accountant, it's a perfectly respectable profession. Accountants keep the world running. Accountants make sure businesses don't collapse and taxes get filed and money goes where it's supposed to go. There's absolutely nothing wrong with being an accountant. But to Melissa, in her rage-filled, increasingly panicked mind, accountant was apparently the worst insult she could come up with. Not asshole, not bastard, not any of the actually offensive words that people usually deploy during relationship meltdowns. No, she went with accountant, because in her warped worldview, being good with numbers and responsible with money was somehow shameful. We're accountants, but hot. That's what I told myself earlier, and I stood by it. Financial analysts are just accountants with better presentations and more interesting problems to solve. Anyway, I listened to all 12 voicemails in chronological order, watching the emotional trajectory go from annoyed to angry to desperate to furious, like some kind of psychological documentary about the 7 stages of grief except condensed into 8 hours and focused entirely on the death of unrestricted credit card access. But the voicemails were just the opening act. The real show started later that evening when she found my envelope. I'd snuck back to the house around 6 p.m., during that window when I knew she'd still be out, probably at Sabrina's or Tina's, crying into a glass of wine that someone else paid for and complaining about what a terrible person I was. The house was empty, quiet, almost peaceful without her energy filling up the space. I didn't linger, didn't get sentimental, just walked straight to the bedroom, opened her makeup drawer, the one that was organized with the precision of a military operation, every product in its designated spot, and placed my envelope right in the center where she couldn't possibly miss it. The envelope contained screenshots. Beautiful, damning, high-resolution screenshots of every account closure, every password change, every financial maneuver I'd made over the past 48 hours. Bank statements showing zero balances. Credit card cancellation confirmations. Account transfer receipts. Everything documented, timestamped, official. But that wasn't all. Because I'm thorough and I believe in overwhelming evidence, I'd also included photos from the private investigator. Oh yeah, did I mention I'd hired a PI? Because I had, about 2 months ago when Melissa started working late, 3 nights a week, and coming home smelling like cologne that definitely wasn't mine. The PI's name was Rodriguez, a former cop who'd gotten tired of actual police work and now made good money following cheating spouses around shopping mall parking garages. He'd gotten some fantastic shots of Melissa and Harold, in his car, in parking structures, going into hotels during what were supposedly business lunches. Nothing X-rated, because Rodriguez was a professional, but definitely incriminating enough to establish a pattern of behavior that no lawyer could explain away. Parking garage edition, as I like to call it. Harold's silver sedan, easily identifiable by the dorky bumper sticker that said, "I'd rather be golfing." Melissa's face clearly visible in multiple shots. Timestamps and locations on every photo. It was beautiful, really. A portfolio of betrayal, professionally documented. I'd arranged everything in the envelope chronologically, creating a narrative arc that started with "your accounts are gone" and ended with "also I have proof of everything you did." It was like a choose-your-own-adventure book, except there was only one adventure, and it was called "You Messed Up Catastrophically." She must have found it around midnight, based on when my phone started ringing again. I was already in bed at the motel. They'd given me a weekly rate after I explained I was going through some stuff, and the manager had nodded knowingly, because apparently extended motel stays during divorce proceedings were common enough that they had a special rate for it. I was just drifting off, actually feeling peaceful for the first time in months, when my phone lit up with her name. This time I answered, not because I wanted to have a conversation, but because I wanted her to know I was choosing to engage on my terms, in my time, when I decided it was convenient. "Dennis," she said, her voice shaking in a way I'd never heard before. Not angry shaking, not crying shaking, but something else. Fear shaking. The voice of someone who'd just looked into the abyss and realized the abyss had receipts. "Can we talk?" I let the silence stretch out for a few seconds, taking my time, making her wait, letting her anxiety build. Then I said, in the most casual, conversational tone I could manage, "Sure, but only if your boss is free too. We can make it a team meeting. Maybe do a PowerPoint presentation about consequences. I'm great at PowerPoint. Lots of graphs and charts. Very professional." I could hear her sharp intake of breath, that moment where she realized I wasn't just angry or hurt. I was done. Completely, utterly, irreversibly done. "Dennis, please," she started, but I didn't let her finish. Click. I hung up, set my phone to do not disturb, and rolled over in bed with a smile on my face. The great meltdown had officially begun, and I had a front row seat to the best show in town. Except I wasn't actually watching because I had better things to do, like sleep peacefully for the first time in years without someone next to me who thought partnership meant access to unlimited funds with zero accountability. Tomorrow she'd probably try again. Tomorrow she'd probably show up somewhere, try to corner me, try to explain or justify or manipulate her way back into my good graces. But tomorrow was tomorrow's problem. Tonight, I was just a man who'd finally stood up for himself, holding boundaries like they were Olympic torches, and feeling pretty damn good about all of it. Somewhere across town, Melissa was probably staring at those photos, those screenshots, that evidence, and finally understanding that actions have consequences. And me? I was drifting off to sleep with the kind of peace that comes from knowing you've handled a bad situation in the most spectacularly efficient way possible. Petty? Maybe. Satisfying? Absolutely. Deserved? 100%. 3 days later, Melissa got the big envelope. Not a regular envelope. Not one of those standard white business envelopes. That could contain anything from a credit card offer to a dentist appointment reminder. No, this was the envelope, the kind that's thick and official looking, the kind that gets hand-delivered by a process server who doesn't make small talk, the kind that has no return address because it doesn't need one. You know exactly what's inside an envelope like that before you even open it, and what's inside is never good news. I wasn't there to see her receive it, obviously, but Ray's office had sprung for a process server with a sense of humor. A guy named Marcus who'd been doing this job for 15 years and had seen every possible human reaction to being served divorce papers. According to Marcus's report, which he sent to Ray with more detail than strictly necessary, but which I appreciated nonetheless, Melissa had been in her bathrobe at 11 a.m. on a Wednesday, which told me everything I needed to know about how well she was handling the situation. She'd answered the door looking like she'd just rolled out of bed, which she probably had, because employment and personal hygiene tend to take a back seat when your entire life is imploding. Marcus said she looked confused when he asked if she was Melissa Chun, like maybe she was considering lying about her own identity to avoid whatever was coming. But she'd confirmed it was her, and he'd handed her the envelope with the classic line, "You've been served." Marcus reported that her face went through approximately 6 different expressions in rapid succession: confusion, recognition, denial, anger, panic, and finally something he described as the look of someone who just realized they parked in a tow-away zone 3 hours ago. He said she just stood there in the doorway, holding the envelope like it might explode, while he walked back to his car and drove away. Professional to the end, that Marcus. Inside that beautiful, legally binding envelope was everything Melissa had probably been dreading since the moment she'd found my photos and screenshots. Divorce filing, official, notarized, filed with the county clerk's office. Property transfer documents showing that the house, which was primarily in my name anyway because I'd put down the down payment and made 90% of the mortgage payments, was being transferred solely to my name. Investment account statements showing the separation of assets. And the piece de resistance, the thing that probably made her soul leave her body. Prenup, Clause 14C. Oh, you thought we didn't have a prenup? Of course we had a prenup. I'm a financial analyst. I plan for contingencies the way some people plan birthday parties. When Melissa and I got engaged, I'd insisted on a prenup, and she'd signed it without really reading it, because she was too focused on planning the wedding and picking out centerpieces and arguing with her mother about the guest list. She'd waved it off as unnecessary, but whatever makes you happy, honey, which should have been my first red flag that she didn't take our financial partnership seriously. That prenup had a lot of standard clauses about asset division and debt responsibility, but Clause 14C was special. Clause 14C was my insurance policy, my escape hatch, my golden ticket out of financial obligation. It stated, in very clear legal language that had been reviewed by 3 different attorneys, that in the event of dissolution of marriage due to infidelity, the unfaithful party would forfeit any claim to alimony, spousal support, or division of assets acquired during the marriage through the faithful party's income. Translation: no alimony for cheaters. More specifically, no alimony for Melissa. Even more specifically, Melissa was about to discover that her decision to sleep with Harold was going to cost her a lot more than her dignity and her reputation. It was going to cost her every single dollar she thought she was entitled to. Ray had done beautiful work with the filing. Every page was perfectly formatted, every clause properly cited, every piece of evidence meticulously organized. He'd included the PI photos, the account statements showing her excessive spending, documentation of her refusing to contribute equally to household expenses, and a timeline of events that painted a very clear picture of a woman who treated her marriage like an ATM with unlimited withdrawals. But the property transfer documents, those were my personal favorite part of this whole legal symphony. See, the house had always been a point of contention. Melissa loved that house, loved the address, loved telling people at parties about our charming craftsman in the historic district, like she'd personally built it with her bare hands instead of just picking out paint colors while I dealt with contractors and inspectors and mortgage brokers. She'd always assumed that if we ever split up, and I don't think she seriously believed we would because in her mind I was too passive and compliant to ever leave, she'd get the house. Maybe she'd be generous and let me keep some of my personal belongings. Maybe she'd allow me to take the guest bedroom furniture. But the house? That was hers in her imagination, her prize for putting up with boring old Dennis for 6 years. Wrong. So completely, devastatingly wrong. The house was in my name. The down payment had come from my savings account, accumulated through years of actually having a job and not spending every paycheck on stuff I didn't need. The mortgage payments came from my income. The property taxes, the insurance, the maintenance, the new roof we'd needed last year, the foundation repair, the HVAC replacement, all me. Melissa had contributed exactly nothing to the house except her opinions on throw pillows and her complaints about the bathroom tile. According to the transfer documents Ray had prepared, Melissa's name was being removed from the deed. Not in some future theoretical scenario, not pending court approval, but effective immediately based on the prenup provisions and the evidence of infidelity. She had 30 days to remove her belongings. After that, anything remaining would be considered abandoned property. Her name was gone from the deed, from the accounts, from the investments, from everything we'd built, or more accurately, everything I'd built while she'd been along for the ride. Even Netflix. Especially Netflix, actually, because I'm petty and I knew she was in the middle of 3 different shows. Ray called me about an hour after Marcus confirmed delivery. "She's been served," he said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. Marcus said she looked like she'd been slapped with a frozen fish. "That's oddly specific," I replied, "but accurate imagery. How are you feeling? This is a big step. It's officially real now." I thought about that for a second. How was I feeling? Not sad. Not regretful. Not even angry anymore. Just clear. Like someone had finally cleaned the windshield of my life, and I could see the road ahead without all the grime and bugs obscuring the view. I feel good, I said honestly. Really good, actually. Is that weird? Not even a little bit. You know what's weird? Staying with someone who treats you like a human credit card. You're doing the right thing. She's going to call you, I said, because I knew Melissa. She'd panic. She'd scramble. She'd try to find a lawyer who could somehow undo what had already been done. Oh, I'm counting on it. Patricia's already prepared the "we don't represent both parties" speech. It's very professional and very satisfying to deliver. We talked for a few more minutes about next steps, about timelines, about what to expect from Melissa's inevitable counterattack. Ray assured me that the prenup was airtight, that he'd had 2 other attorneys review it just to be absolutely certain, and that unless Melissa could somehow prove the prenup was signed under duress, which she couldn't, because I had the video from our attorney's office where she was laughing and making jokes while signing it, she didn't have a legal leg to stand on. After I hung up with Ray, I opened my laptop and checked my email. There was one from Patricia with the subject line, "Thought you'd enjoy this." Inside was a single sentence. She called screaming. Ray handled it beautifully. Recording attached if you want entertainment later. I saved that email for future enjoyment. Maybe for a day when I needed a pick-me-up or a reminder of why I'd made these choices. But the real entertainment came from an unexpected source, Harold. Remember Harold? Melissa's boss? The guy who looked like he'd never done anything exciting in his life except maybe organize his sock drawer? The man who was supposed to be her ticket to a better, more exciting life? Yeah, that Harold. Turns out Harold's wife had found out about the affair. I don't know how. Maybe she'd noticed the late nights and the suspicious behavior. Maybe she'd hired her own PI. Maybe Harold had confessed in a moment of guilt-induced panic. However it happened, Mrs. Harold now knew exactly what her husband had been doing in parking garages and hotel rooms during his extended lunch meetings. And Mrs. Harold, unlike me, was not taking the calm, calculated, strategic approach. Mrs. Harold was going full scorched earth. According to the company gossip chain, which reached me through a former colleague who still worked at Melissa's company, Mrs. Harold had shown up at the office on Tuesday afternoon and caused a scene that would probably be talked about in that company for the next decade. She'd apparently walked right past security, taken the elevator to the executive floor, marched into Harold's office, and proceeded to throw his golf trophies out the window one by one while screaming about betrayal and divorce lawyers and making sure he never saw his boat again. Security had eventually escorted her out, but not before she'd managed to throw approximately 15 golf trophies, 3 framed photos, and Harold's dignity out of a 7th-floor window. Harold, meanwhile, had suddenly become very unavailable. Melissa tried calling him multiple times, according to sources who'd seen her phone activity in the office. Every single call went straight to voicemail. She tried texting. No response. She tried emailing. Nothing. She even tried showing up at his office, but his assistant, who'd apparently never liked Melissa and was now free to express that dislike, told her that Harold was in meetings all day and wasn't taking visitors and suggested that maybe Melissa should consider the professional implications of her behavior. Translation: Harold was throwing her under the bus faster than she could say, but he told me he loved me. Because of course he was. Harold wasn't going to leave his wife for Melissa. Harold wasn't going to ride off into the sunset with his young mistress and start a new life. Harold was going to do what Harolds always do in these situations: deny everything, blame the other woman, get a good divorce lawyer, and try to salvage whatever he could from the wreckage of his marriage and career. Melissa was collateral damage, an inconvenient problem that needed to be distanced from as quickly as possible, a liability to be minimized and forgotten. Ray texted me a screenshot of an email Melissa had sent to his office. "Please call me. I need to understand my options. I can't afford an attorney. Can we work something out?" I stared at that screenshot for a long moment. 6 months ago, I might have felt sorry for her. I might have considered helping her find legal representation. I might have softened, might have thought about compromising, might have let guilt override my better judgment. But that was 6 months ago. That was before the bed scene, before the credit card, before the voicemails, before I'd seen exactly who she was when she thought she'd won. I texted Ray back, sent her a list of legal aid organizations. Professional courtesy, nothing more. His response was immediate. Already done. You're getting better at this. I wasn't getting better at being cruel. I was just getting better at protecting myself. There's a difference, and it's an important one. That night, I stood in my motel room, which had become less depressing and more comfortable over the past week, and looked at myself in the mirror. I looked different, lighter somehow. The stress lines around my eyes had softened. My jaw wasn't permanently clenched anymore. Freedom looked good on me. Outside, Melissa's world was burning down. Inside, mine was finally starting to rebuild, and I was okay with that. More than okay, actually. Remember Melissa's brunch squad? Sabrina, Tina, and Lola, the three musketeers of mimosas and manufactured drama? Yeah, those friends. The ones who'd been absolutely essential to Melissa's identity, who'd validated every bad decision she'd ever made, who'd encouraged her worst impulses while pretending it was empowerment. Those ride-or-die besties who'd sworn they'd always have each other's backs no matter what. They vanished faster than free Wi-Fi in a coffee shop when you forget to buy something. Poof. Gone. Disappeared like they'd never existed in the first place. It started subtly, the way these things always do. Group chat messages that went unanswered just a little too long. Brunch invitations that got vague responses like, maybe next week, super busy right now, without any actual follow-up. Instagram stories that Melissa wasn't tagged in anymore, even though she could see Sabrina, Tina, and Lola all together at their usual spots, drinking their usual drinks, posting their usual content. Apparently being the woman whose credit card got cut in half in public wasn't exactly great for one's social media brand or one's influencer aspirations. Who knew that public financial humiliation could be so socially contagious? Melissa had become toxic by association, and her friends, those loyal, devoted, we're here for you no matter what friends, had suddenly developed a severe allergy to scandal. Sabrina, who'd literally cried at Melissa's wedding and sworn they were sisters for life, suddenly couldn't find time to meet up. Always had some excuse ready. Visiting her mom, reorganizing her closet, Mercury was in retrograde, so she was staying home. Tina started leaving her texts on read, that special kind of passive-aggressive ghosting where you can see they've read your message but they're choosing not to respond. And Lola? Lola blocked her. Just straight up blocked her number after Melissa made the mistake of asking if she could borrow money for a lawyer. The final nail in the friendship coffin came when Melissa saw on Instagram that they'd had brunch without her. Same restaurant, same table they always sat at, same mimosas, same forced laughter. Except instead of 4 chairs, there were 3. Her spot had been filled by some new girl, someone younger and less problematic, someone whose life wasn't currently a dumpster fire visible from space. Melissa's text to the group chat went completely unanswered. Not even a sorry, we should have told you, or a things have been weird lately. Just cold, brutal silence. The kind of silence that speaks louder than any explanation ever could. Even Harold had ghosted her completely by this point. The man she'd risked everything for, the man who'd promised her that what they had was special and different and worth it, had blocked her on everything. Email, phone, social media, completely unreachable. She'd tried calling from different numbers, but his assistant had apparently been given strict instructions because the response was always the same. Mr. Harold is unavailable and has asked that you cease all contact. She'd called me again during this period, one final, desperate attempt to salvage something, anything from the wreckage of her life. I was at a perfectly nice restaurant having dinner alone, enjoying a steak that I'd ordered without having to consult anyone about their dietary preferences or listen to complaints about the menu. My phone buzzed. Melissa's name. I considered not answering, but curiosity got the better of me. "Dennis, please," she said, her voice cracking in a way that might have moved me a week ago. "We can fix this. I made a mistake. I know I did. But we can work through this. We can go to counseling. I'll change. I'll be better. Just please, can we talk?" I took a sip of my wine, let her words hang in the air for a moment, and then said calmly, "Melissa, the only thing that needs fixing is your spending habits and your decision-making skills. I can't help with either of those." She screamed. Actually screamed into the phone like a character in a horror movie who just saw the monster. "You're destroying my life." I muted my phone mid-scream, set it down on the table, and went back to my steak. Silence had never sounded so satisfying. It was raining when she finally found my new apartment. One of those miserable, cold rains that soaks through everything and makes you question every life choice that led you to be outside in this weather. I heard the knocking before I saw her through the peephole, desperate, urgent knocking that echoed through my tiny one-bedroom like she was trying to break down the door with her bare hands. There she was, hair completely drenched, plastered to her head like seaweed. Mascara running down her face in black streams that made her look like a melting crayon, specifically the black one that nobody ever uses in the box. Her clothes were soaked through, and she was shivering, though I couldn't tell if it was from the cold or from whatever emotional breakdown had driven her to show up unannounced at my door. "Please, Dennis," she called through the door, her voice hoarse from crying or screaming or both. "Let me in. We need to talk. I know I messed up. I know I hurt you. But please, just let me explain." I stood there on the other side of that door, completely dry and warm in my apartment, watching her through the peephole like she was a character in a movie I was only mildly interested in. I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, no urge to let her in and hear her out. Just a calm, settled certainty that this chapter was closed. I walked to my desk, grabbed a piece of paper and a pen, and wrote one sentence in clear, deliberate handwriting. "You said I wasn't man enough to leave. Turns out I was too much man for you to respect." I folded it once, walked back to the door, and slid it through the gap at the bottom, the kind of move you see in prison movies when they're passing contraband between cells. The paper landed at her feet. Through the peephole, I watched her pick it up with shaking hands, unfold it, and read it. Her face crumpled, fresh tears mixed with the rain and mascara already coating her face. She looked up at the door, maybe hoping I'd changed my mind, maybe hoping for some sign that I was weakening. But I just stood there, silent, watching her stand in the rain like the ending of every sad romantic movie, except this time the guy doesn't run out and forgive everything. She stood there crying for what felt like forever, but was probably only a few minutes. Then, finally, she turned and walked away, her footsteps echoing in the hallway until they faded to nothing. I went back to my microwave dinner, chicken Alfredo, the 99-cent kind from the frozen food aisle. It was mediocre at best, definitely not as good as a home-cooked meal, but it tasted like victory anyway. The taste of peace, of boundaries held, of self-respect finally restored. Absolutely delicious. Weeks later, my lawyer sent me a screenshot that made my entire month. Melissa had been fired. Not laid off, not downsized, not mutually agreed to part ways. Straight up terminated for cause. Corporate misuse of funds, the email said. Apparently, someone had been using company expense accounts for personal shopping trips, spa days, and other non-business-related purchases, and when the auditors came sniffing around after the Herald scandal broke, they'd found a paper trail longer than a CVS receipt. Herald, that paragon of corporate integrity, had thrown her under the bus so fast she probably got tire marks. Faster than she could say teamwork, or synergy, or any of those meaningless corporate buzzwords she loved so much. He'd provided the auditors with everything they needed, emails, receipts, approval forms he'd never actually approved, and walked away with a slap on the wrist while Melissa got the full nuclear option. Her social circle? Gone. Her job? Gone. Her credit? Destroyed so thoroughly that she probably couldn't finance a pack of gum at this point. She was left with an empty condo that she couldn't afford, a pile of designer bags she couldn't sell for enough to matter, and a silence she'd once mocked me with now surrounding her completely. I sent one final email. Short, simple, devastating. "You gambled on weakness." I just stopped playing. No response came. I didn't expect one. There was nothing left to say, nothing left to negotiate, nothing left between us except legally mandated distance and the ashes of what she'd burned down herself. I leaned back in my new office chair. I'd gotten a promotion at work, funny how much better you perform when you're not emotionally drained, and poured myself a glass of scotch. The good stuff this time, not the bottom-shelf nonsense I'd been drinking in that motel. I'd moved into a nice apartment, updated my wardrobe, started going to the gym regularly, even went on a couple of dates with people who actually respected me. Life was good, really genuinely good. Some men roar when they win, beating their chests and making sure everyone knows about their victory. Some men gloat, rubbing it in, making the defeated feel even worse. Me? I just laughed quietly to myself, alone in my apartment, savoring the most important lesson I'd learned through this entire mess. The best revenge isn't screaming or violence or public humiliation. The best revenge is excellent financial planning, solid boundaries, and the quiet confidence that comes from knowing your worth. I raised my glass to the empty room, to my freedom, to my future. Cheers to never settling again, I said, and I meant every word. My wife texted, "Late dinner with clients. I need to close some deals, don't wait up." I replied, "Enjoy the lobster. Tell Rick to check his stock portfolio." She called instantly, voice shaking, Rick screaming. You know that feeling when your gut knows something's wrong, but your brain's still trying to give everyone the benefit of the doubt like some kind of delusional optimist? Yeah, that was me for about 6 months straight, standing in my garage every night like some kind of grease monkey philosopher, wiping my hands on rags that were somehow dirtier than the engines I was fixing, wondering why my wife suddenly needed to work more hours than a residency doctor during flu season. I'm talking late nights, weekend emergency meetings, and enough client dinners to feed a small nation. But hey, I'm a trusting guy, or maybe just a guy who's really good at lying to himself while rebuilding carburetors. So there I was, about 7:30 on a Thursday evening, elbow deep in a 2015 Honda Civic that had more problems than my marriage, though at that point it was a close race, when my phone buzzed on the workbench. I figured it was another one of those spam calls about my car's extended warranty, which is ironic considering I literally fix cars for a living, but no, it was Sabrina, my beautiful, successful, definitely not cheating wife, with a text that read, "Late dinner with clients. Don't wait up, Red Heart." Now, let me break this down for you because I'm fluent in bullshit. Comes with the territory of dealing with customers who swear they barely tapped the pole that left their bumper in another zip code. First, the heart emoji. When your wife starts punctuating obvious lies with heart emojis, that's not romance, folks. That's damage control. It's like putting a bow on a hand grenade and calling it a gift. Second, "Don't wait up" is code for, "I'm going to be doing something I really don't want you asking questions about. So just go to bed like a good little husband and we'll pretend everything's fine over breakfast." But here's the thing about me. I might work with my hands, but I'm not stupid. I'd been noticing things. Little things at first, like how she suddenly started buying new lingerie, but I sure as hell wasn't seeing it. Or how her phone was now password protected when it used to just sit on the counter like a paperweight. Or, and this one's my favorite, how she started going to the gym 4 times a week, but somehow never seemed to actually work out, considering she'd come home looking perfect, not a hair out of place. Makeup still flawless like she'd just stepped out of a magazine shoot rather than a spin class. So I'm standing there, looking at this text, and something in my brain just clicked. You know that moment in movies where the main character finally figures out the twist, and everything suddenly makes sense? It was like that, except instead of dramatic music, I just had the sound of someone's car alarm going off in the parking lot, and the smell of motor oil mixing with my growing rage. I wiped my hands on my jeans, which Sabrina hated, by the way, always nagging me about ruining clothes, and picked up my phone. Now, I could have done what most guys do. I could have blown up her phone, demanded to know where she was, maybe even driven to her office like some unhinged stalker in a Lifetime movie. But that's amateur hour, and I didn't spend years building a successful business by making impulsive decisions when I'm angry. No, I'm more of a strategic thinker, a planner. Some might even call it petty, but I prefer methodical. So I texted back, "Enjoy the lobster. Tell Rick to check his stock portfolio." Let me explain the genius of this message, because it deserves appreciation. See, about 2 weeks earlier, I'd found a receipt in her car, just wedged between the seats like forgotten evidence, from this fancy steakhouse downtown, the kind of place that charges $40 for a potato. And on that receipt, along with 2 filet mignons and a bottle of wine that cost more than my monthly insurance payment, there was a note from the waiter. "Hope you two enjoyed your evening. Marcus." 2. Not a group. Not clients plural. 2. And Rick? Oh, Rick was her colleague from work. The guy she mentioned approximately 4,000 times more than any normal coworker. "Rick thinks this campaign will be great. Rick suggested we try this new approach. Rick's going through a divorce." Yeah, Rick. I'd never met him, but I'd seen his name pop up on her phone enough times to know his texting schedule better than my own mother's. The stock portfolio thing? Pure improvisation. I had no idea if Rick even had stocks, but it sounded threatening and vague enough to make a guilty person panic. 3 seconds. That's how long it took for my phone to ring. Not a text back. Not a "what are you talking about" message. A full-blown phone call. The kind you make when you're absolutely losing your mind and can't type fast enough to control the damage. I let it ring twice. Had to savor the moment, before answering with the most casual hello. I could muster, like I hadn't just dropped a nuclear bomb into her evening. "Mark, what does that mean?" Her voice was shaking. That kind of trembling that happens when someone's trying really hard not to sound guilty, but failing spectacularly. And here's the beautiful part. In the background, I could hear him. Rick, the man himself. He was yelling something that sounded like, what did he say? Mixed with what I can only describe as the audio equivalent of watching your entire life fall apart in real time. I smiled. Really smiled, probably for the first time in months. "Just wanted to make sure you're having a good dinner, babe. You know how I worry about your nutrition." The sarcasm was so thick you could have used it to fill potholes. "And hey, if you see Rick, tell him I said congrats on the portfolio. Diversification is important in today's market." She hung up. No goodbye, no explanation, just that sharp click of someone who knows they've been caught, but hasn't figured out their escape plan yet. I stood there in my garage, surrounded by tools and car parts and the lingering smell of dishonesty, and I laughed. Really laughed. The kind of laugh that probably made me look insane to anyone passing by, but I didn't care. Because that, my friends, is how I found out I wasn't crazy, just married to someone who thought I was too stupid to notice. Turns out, I notice everything. I just choose my moments carefully. And brother, that moment was just the beginning. Let me paint you a picture of what Sabrina and I looked like to the outside world. Because context is important when you're trying to understand how a marriage goes from couple goals to crime scene investigation in the span of about 18 months. We were that couple. You know the one. The pair that makes you simultaneously want to congratulate them and also maybe throw up a little bit because they seem too perfect to be real. We had the matching Halloween costumes, the coordinated Christmas cards, the joint Instagram account that was basically a highlight reel of our amazing life together that got more likes than either of our individual accounts ever did. People literally commented things like relationship goals and when will it be my turn under our photos like we were some kind of romantic aspirational brand. Sabrina worked in marketing for this mid-sized firm downtown that specialized in luxury goods campaigns. You know, the kind of company that convinces rich people they need a $15,000 handbag to feel complete as human beings. She was good at it too, really good, which I guess makes sense considering she'd been marketing our relationship as perfect for years when it was actually held together with duct tape and denial. She wore these power suits that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment, the kind with sharp shoulders that made her look like she could fire you just by walking past your desk. And the heels, Jesus, the heels. I'm talking stilettos that could double as weapons in a self-defense class, the kind that made this clicking sound on hardwood floors that said, "I'm important, and you should probably get out of my way." She looked successful, sounded successful, and walked through life like someone who had their shit together in a way that made everyone else feel like they were failing at adulthood. Me? I owned a small auto shop on the east side of town called Mark's Motors. Real creative, I know, but when you're 26 and taking out a business loan, you're not exactly thinking about branding genius. I spent my days covered in grease, arguing with customers about why yes, you do actually need to change your oil regularly, and trying to keep my crew of 4 mechanics from accidentally killing each other over whose turn it was to deal with Mrs. Henderson's minivan that smelled like a combination of old French fries and broken dreams. I wore work boots that had seen more action than most people's entire shoe collections, jeans with permanent oil stains that Sabrina stopped trying to wash out after the first year, and t-shirts that advertised beer brands I didn't even drink. We were, aesthetically speaking, a complete mismatch. Her in her designer everything. Me looking like I just crawled out from under a car, which was usually accurate. But somehow it worked. At least it looked like it worked. We'd met at a mutual friend's barbecue 7 years ago, one of those summer parties where everyone's drinking beer they don't like because it's craft and pretending they enjoy small talk about jobs they hate. She thought I was funny, actually laughed at my jokes, which was apparently a rare quality she appreciated after dating a string of guys who took themselves so seriously you'd think they were auditioning for a documentary about their own importance. I thought she was gorgeous and way out of my league, The kind of woman who probably had a waiting list of dudes trying to take her to fancy restaurants I couldn't afford. But we clicked. We had this chemistry that everyone noticed, the kind where we could make each other laugh in the middle of boring social situations and have entire conversations with just looks across the room. Fast forward through a year of dating. A proposal at her favorite restaurant that I'd saved up for 3 months to afford, and a wedding that her parents paid for because my budget was more backyard potluck than elegant venue with a string quartet. We moved into a decent house in a decent neighborhood, the kind of place where people mow their lawns on Saturday mornings and wave at each other while secretly judging everyone's landscaping choices. We got a joint savings account, went to couples therapy when her temper got bad, because apparently throwing dishes during arguments isn't healthy communication. Who knew? And generally lived the life that's supposed to lead to kids, a golden retriever, and retirement in Florida. From the outside, we were crushing it. Social media showed the vacation photos, the anniversary dinners, the weekend brunches where we looked happy and in love. What it didn't show was how we'd stopped having actual conversations somewhere around year 4, replacing them with logistics about bills and whose turn it was to buy toilet paper. It didn't show how she'd roll her eyes when I made jokes at parties, or how I'd started sleeping on the couch more often than our bed because she needed space for her morning routine that apparently required the entire bedroom. Our love life had become about as exciting as watching paint dry in a beige room. Infrequent, scheduled like a dentist appointment, and executed with all the passion of someone filling out tax forms. She stopped laughing at my jokes probably 8 months before the text, which was tragic because I'm genuinely hilarious. I'm the guy who can make customers laugh even when I'm telling them their transmission is dead and it's going to cost $3,000 to fix. But Sabrina? She'd hear my best material and just stare at me like I'd spoken in a language she didn't understand, or worse, like she understood but couldn't be bothered to pretend it was funny anymore. That should have been my first real clue, honestly. When your wife stops finding you amusing, she's either depressed or checked out, and Sabrina seemed way too energetic lately to be depressed. Then there was the smell thing. Look, I work around cars all day, so I know what motor oil smells like, what brake fluid smells like, what that weird burning smell is when someone's been riding their clutch too hard. And I also know what my wife's perfume smells like. This floral thing she'd worn since we started dating, something with roses and vanilla that cost $80 a bottle and came in packaging fancier than most people's wedding gifts. But lately, when she'd come home from these late work nights, she didn't smell like her perfume. She smelled like cologne. Men's cologne. The expensive kind that guys like Rick probably buy because they think it makes them sophisticated instead of just making them smell like they bathed in a department store. When your wife starts working late 4 nights a week and comes home smelling like someone else's husband, you start connecting dots. Even if you're not great at math, which I'm not, that's why I have an accountant, you can figure out that something doesn't add up. The business trips that suddenly multiplied, the phone calls she'd take in another room, the way she'd angle her phone away from me when texting like she was guarding classified government secrets instead of just confirming dinner plans. I'm not an idiot, despite what my high school guidance counselor might have thought when I chose auto mechanics over college. I was just choosing to be patient, to gather information, to make absolutely sure before I did anything that couldn't be undone. Because here's the thing about being married to someone for 6 years, you know them. You know their patterns, their tells, their lies. And Sabrina was lying. She was lying about where she was, who she was with, and what she was doing. And I was done pretending I didn't notice. Here's something they don't teach you in marriage counseling, or those dumb self-help books that Sabrina used to leave around the house like subtle hints that I should work on myself. Sometimes the smartest thing you can do when you know you're being cheated on is absolutely nothing. At least not immediately. See, most guys in my position would have gone full caveman mode, kicked down doors, thrown accusations around like confetti at a parade, maybe even confronted the other guy in some parking lot showdown that ends with someone's face meeting the pavement and the other person meeting a lawyer. That's the emotional response, the one that feels good for about 30 seconds until you realize you've just handed your cheating spouse all the ammunition they need to paint you as the crazy, jealous, unstable one. And I wasn't about to give Sabrina that satisfaction. No, sir. If this marriage was going down, it was going down on my terms, with all the evidence neatly organized in a folder like I was preparing for the world's most depressing presentation. Besides, I'm a mechanic. I diagnose problems for a living. You don't just start randomly replacing parts because you think maybe that's what's wrong. You run tests, you gather data, you figure out exactly what's broken before you start tearing things apart. Same principle applies to marriages. Turns out, except the parts are more expensive and the warranty expired about 3 years ago. So I became a detective. Not the cool kind with a trench coat and a magnifying glass. More like the pathetic kind who checks their spouse's credit card statements while eating cereal at 2 in the morning and questioning every life choice that led to this moment. But effective, nonetheless. I started small, because going full FBI surveillance mode right out of the gate is how you get caught, and getting caught before you have the full picture is amateur hour. I'm talking about just paying attention, really paying attention, to the things I'd been unconsciously ignoring for months, because acknowledging them would have meant admitting my marriage was circling the drain faster than water in a broken garbage disposal. The receipts were my first solid evidence, and honestly, Sabrina made it almost too easy. She wasn't even trying to hide them, just leaving them in her car like breadcrumbs in a really depressing fairy tale where the happy ending involves a good divorce lawyer. There was the steakhouse receipt I mentioned earlier, $247 for dinner for two, paid for on a Tuesday night when she texted me she was working late on the Henderson campaign. Then there was a receipt from this boutique hotel downtown, the kind of place that charges $400 a night and has those fluffy robes that people definitely steal. The date on that one? The same weekend she'd told me she was at a marketing conference in Chicago. I'd even driven her to the airport, watched her walk through security with her rolling suitcase and her travel coffee mug, playing the part of the supportive husband while she was apparently just playing me. But my personal favorite, the one that really sealed the deal, was a receipt from a jewelry store. Not just any jewelry store, but Tiffany's. Now, I don't know what Rick bought her, because the receipt just showed an amount, $850. But I know for damn sure I've never bought my wife anything from Tiffany's because I'm not made of money, and also because every time I've suggested jewelry for birthdays or anniversaries, she's told me she'd rather have practical gifts like kitchen appliances or contributions to her IRA. But apparently when Rick suggests jewelry, it's romantic. When I suggest it, it's a waste of money. The double standards in this situation were really something special. Then there were the photos. Oh man, the photos. See, Sabrina was big on social media, had like 3,000 Instagram followers who apparently cared deeply about her morning smoothie recipes and her authentic life updates that were about as authentic as a $3 bill. She was always posting pictures of everything: her lunch, her office, her shoes, the sky when it looked particularly photogenic. But I started noticing that her business trip photos were weird. She'd post shots of hotel lobbies and conference rooms, sure, but never with other people. Never with the co-workers she was supposedly traveling with for these important client meetings. Just empty spaces with captions like "grinding never stops" and "building the dream," with a bunch of hashtags that made me want to throw my phone across the room. So I did what any reasonable person would do. I reverse image searched a few of them. Turns out, that conference in Seattle she posted about, those photos were from a resort in Napa Valley, about 3 hours away from where she claimed to be. The team dinner photo that showed a fancy restaurant table? I found the same image on the restaurant's website. It was from their promotional materials. She wasn't even using original photos, just stealing them from the internet, like she was catfishing her own Instagram followers. The audacity was almost impressive in a sociopathic kind of way. But the real smoking gun, the piece of evidence that moved this from "I think something's wrong" to "I know exactly what's happening," was an email I found on our shared iPad. Now, before you judge me for snooping, let me just say that she was the one who insisted we share an iPad for household management purposes, synced to both our email accounts so we could coordinate schedules and grocery lists and all that domestic partnership nonsense. So technically, I wasn't snooping. I was just using our shared device and happened to notice an email notification pop up at the exact wrong, or right, depending on your perspective, moment. The subject line read, "Can't wait for tomorrow night." The sender? Rick Henderson. Yeah, Henderson. As in the client whose campaign she'd been working on for the past 6 months. As in the guy whose name came up so often in conversation that I'd started mentally adding him to our Christmas card list as a joke. I opened it. And look, I know that's technically a violation of privacy, But so is sleeping with your coworker while your husband makes you dinner every night. So let's call it even. And holy hell, it was bad. Not just bad, like romance novel level cringe bad. Can you bring that black dress again? It started. I can't stop thinking about how you looked in it last week. Marcus at the restaurant asked if we were celebrating something special, and I wanted to say yes, the fact that she exists, but I just smiled and said anniversary. He gave us free champagne. We should go back. It went on like that for 3 more paragraphs, each one more nauseating than the last, full of references to inside jokes I wasn't part of and plans for future rendezvous that apparently I was supposed to remain blissfully ignorant about while I rotated tires and balanced checkbooks. I took screenshots. Lots of them. Saved them to a cloud drive she didn't have access to, printed copies, and stored them in my toolbox at work where she'd never think to look. I documented everything. Dates, times, locations, amounts spent. I created a spreadsheet, because apparently that's what betrayal turns you into. The kind of person who organizes infidelity data in Excel with color-coded categories. Green for confirmed dates, yellow for suspicious activity, red for definitely cheating, have proof. By the end of week 3 of my investigation, that spreadsheet had more red cells than a biology textbook. But I didn't confront her. Not yet. Because here's what I learned from years of running a business. Timing is everything. You don't show your hand until you've stacked the deck completely in your favor. You don't reveal what you know until you've prepared for every possible response. You definitely don't start a fight until you've already won the war. So I smiled. I cooked dinner. I asked about her day with genuine sounding interest while mentally calculating exactly how much of our joint savings account I could legally move before she noticed. And when she texted me that Thursday night, late dinner with clients. Don't wait up, Red Heart. I knew exactly where she was, who she was with, and probably what she was ordering based on past receipt patterns. So I sent my reply about lobster and stock portfolios, hit send, and waited for the explosion I'd been carefully engineering for weeks. The phone call that came 3 seconds later, that was just the sound of my patience paying off and her lies finally catching up to her. And brother, it was the sweetest sound I'd heard in months. The sound of her car pulling into the driveway at 11:53 p.m. Yes, I checked the clock, because at this point I was documenting everything like I was building a legal case, which technically I was. Had this quality to it that I'd never noticed before. Kind of like when you hear a song you've listened to 1,000 times, but suddenly you catch a lyric that changes the whole meaning. Her BMW made this specific chirping sound when she locked it, and that night it sounded less like a car alarm and more like the death rattle of our marriage. Poetic, right? I should write greeting cards for divorced people. Sorry your spouse is a lying cheater. Here's a picture of a sunset and some generically drew about new beginnings. I was sitting in the living room with all the lights off except for the TV, which was playing some late-night rerun of a cop show where everyone's problems get solved in 42 minutes minus commercial breaks. Real life should come with that kind of convenient resolution timeline. I'd positioned myself on the couch with a beer I hadn't actually drunk, just held it like a prop because I wanted to look casual, not like a man who'd spent the last 4 hours planning psychological warfare while online shopping for new deadbolts. The front door opened with that specific creaking sound that I'd been meaning to fix for 6 months, but now felt oddly appropriate for the horror movie my life had become. Still up? Sabrina's voice came from the entryway, and I could hear her kicking off those ridiculous heels that probably cost more than my truck payment. She sounded tired, but also nervous, like someone who'd just robbed a bank and was trying to act normal at the grocery store checkout. There was this slight edge to her voice, a tremor that she was trying to cover with casual friendliness, like we were roommates discussing the weather instead of a married couple where one person had just blown up the other person's whole secret life with a single text message. Couldn't sleep, I said, not turning away from the TV, even though I couldn't tell you what was happening on screen if someone offered me $1,000. You know how it is. Hard to relax when the Dow Jones is this unstable. Really volatile market conditions lately. Makes a man nervous about his investments. I let that last word hang in the air like a fart in an elevator. Impossible to ignore and deeply uncomfortable for everyone involved. I could feel her standing in the doorway, could practically hear the gears turning in her head as she tried to figure out if I was making a pointed comment or just being weird. She settled on the latter, because people who are lying always want to believe they're getting away with it. The Dow Jones. Since when do you follow the stock market? She laughed, but it sounded wrong. Like a recording of a laugh played at the wrong speed. You still mad about that time I suggested we invest in mutual funds, and you said you'd rather invest in lottery tickets? People change, I said, finally looking at her. And Jesus, she looked guilty. Like comically, obviously guilty. Her makeup was smudged in that way that happens when you've been doing things that smudge makeup. Her hair was slightly messed up despite her obvious attempts to fix it in the car. And this is my favorite part. She was wearing her blouse inside out. Not fully inside out. Just the tag was showing at the back of her neck like a little flag of infidelity waving hello. How was dinner? Fine. Good. You know, typical client dinner stuff. Boring presentations, overpriced wine, the usual. She was walking toward the kitchen now, probably to avoid eye contact, which was smart because I was staring at her like a prosecutor who already knows the defendant is guilty but wants to watch them lie on the stand anyway. We talked about the campaign strategy for the spring launch. Very productive. Rick thinks we should pivot toward. Rick. I said his name like it was a cough, just interrupting her mid-sentence because I could, and because watching her flinch was deeply satisfying in a petty way that I'm not proud of, but also absolutely am. How is good old Rick? His portfolio doing okay? I know the market's been rough on some people lately. She stopped in the doorway to the kitchen, her back still to me, and I watched her shoulders tense up like she'd just stepped on a Lego barefoot. His portfolio? Mark, what are you talking about? Are you feeling okay? You're being really weird. The deflection tactic, classic move. When caught off guard, pretend the other person is the crazy one. I'd seen customers use this strategy when confronted about lying about their car maintenance. Sir, you haven't changed your oil in 15,000 miles. Why are you being so aggressive about oil? Are you okay? I'm great, actually. Never better. Just making conversation about mutual acquaintances and their financial well-being. Isn't that what married couples do? Chat about their respective colleagues' investment strategies. I took a fake sip of my warm beer, maintaining eye contact even though she still wasn't looking at me. You smell different. New perfume. What? No. Same one I always wear. You're being really weird tonight, Mark. I'm going to bed. She practically ran up the stairs, and I heard our bedroom door close with more force than necessary. Not quite a slam, but definitely a, I need to be alone to panic in private, kind of close. I stayed on the couch for another hour, finishing the cop show and starting another one, giving her time to spiral in whatever web of anxiety she was probably weaving up there. When I finally went upstairs around 1 a.m., she was pretending to be asleep. I could tell because her breathing was all wrong. Too controlled, too purposeful. Real sleep breathing is random and sometimes involves light snoring that she always denied doing even though I had recordings. This was theatrical sleep breathing, the kind actors do in movies when they're faking being unconscious. I got into bed without saying anything, turned off the light, and lay there in the dark listening to her pretend to be asleep while I pretended to believe she was asleep. Marriage is just layers of pretending, really. It's pretending all the way down until eventually someone gets tired and drops the act. The next morning was Academy Award worthy. I woke up to the sound of her in the kitchen, and when I came downstairs, she'd made pancakes. Pancakes. We hadn't had a breakfast that wasn't cereal or toast in probably 6 months. But here she was, flipping pancakes like we were auditioning for a cooking show called Couples Who Lie for a Living. She'd even put on makeup and done her hair, looking put together in that way that takes effort, but is supposed to look effortless. Morning, she said with this brightness that belonged in a toothpaste commercial. I thought I'd make us a nice breakfast. We never do this anymore. Isn't this nice? Just us, pancakes, quality time. She was talking too fast, words tumbling out like she couldn't control the speed, and her hands were shaking as she flipped a pancake that ended up more on the stovetop than in the pan. Lovely, I said, pouring myself coffee and watching her try to scrape burnt pancake off the burner. What's the occasion? Did someone die? Win the lottery? Have a mental breakdown? I was being mean. I knew I was being mean, but I'd earned a little meanness after months of being played like a fiddle at a hoedown. Can a wife just make her husband breakfast without it being suspicious? She laughed, and that laugh, man, that laugh. It cracked right in the middle, broke apart like cheap glass hitting tile, and she tried to cover it by coughing and turning back to the stove. You're still being weird from last night. Maybe you should take the day off, stay home, relax. You've been working so hard lately. Translation: Please stay away from anything that might give you more information about my affair. I smiled, syrupy sweet, and sat down at the table. Can't. Got 3 cars coming in today, including Mrs. Henderson's van. You remember Mrs. Henderson, right? Her husband Rick does something with marketing, I think. I hadn't mentioned that her affair partner shared a name with my elderly customer's husband until that moment, and watching her face cycle through confusion, panic, and forced neutrality was worth every second of sleep I'd lost. Different Rick, she said quietly, sliding a plate of pancakes in front of me that looked like they'd been through a war. There are lots of Ricks in the world, Mark. True, I agreed, cutting into breakfast and pretending not to notice how her hands were still shaking or how she couldn't quite meet my eyes. Lots of Ricks. Lots of lies, too. Worlds full of both. I took a bite of pancake that tasted like anxiety and burnt butter. These are great, by the way. Really great. We should do this more often. You know, before things change. She sat down across from me with her own plate, but didn't eat, just pushed food around like a kid avoiding vegetables. And I could absolutely tell, that she knew I knew. She just didn't know how much I knew, what evidence I had, or what I was planning to do about it. The uncertainty was killing her, eating her alive from the inside, while she tried to maintain this facade of normalcy over pancakes neither of us wanted. Spoiler alert, I knew everything. Every lie, every date, every receipt, every text. I had documentation that would make a private investigator weep with professional pride. But I wasn't ready to show my cards yet. Not when watching her squirm was this entertaining. You know what's wild about the internet? It's made stalking socially acceptable as long as you call it research. 20 years ago, if you wanted to find out about someone, you had to hire a private investigator or ask around town like some kind of noir detective in a trench coat. Now, 3 clicks and I know where you went to high school, what your dog's name is, and whether you prefer Starbucks or Dunkin'. It's creepy when you think about it, but also incredibly useful when your wife is having an affair and you need to figure out if the other guy's spouse might want to join forces like some kind of betrayed partner support group / revenge squad. Finding Rick's wife was embarrassingly easy. I typed Rick Henderson marketing into Facebook. Because let's be honest, everyone over 30 is still on Facebook pretending they use it for anything other than arguing about politics and looking up people from high school. And boom, there he was. Profile picture of him looking like exactly the kind of guy who'd have an affair. Professionally attractive in that generic way where you can't quite pin down any memorable features. Wearing a polo shirt that probably cost more than my weekly grocery budget. Smiling with too many teeth like a game show host. His relationship status said, married to Erica Henderson, which was thoughtful of him to advertise considering he was actively betraying that status approximately 4 nights a week at expensive restaurants. I clicked on Erica's profile, and honestly, I felt bad for her immediately. Her bio read, coffee, cats, and cleaning up my husband's messes. HR manager at Westfield Associates. Probably tired. The probably tired part got me. That's the kind of humor you develop when life has been beating you down, but you're too stubborn to admit defeat. Her profile picture showed a woman in her mid-30s with dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, holding a coffee mug that said, I can't adult today, wearing what looked like the universal uniform of the exhausted, yoga pants, and an oversized sweatshirt. She had kind eyes, the kind that probably saw the best in people even when they didn't deserve it. She looked like someone who'd been living parallel to me in this nightmare, without knowing we were in the same horror movie. I spent about 20 minutes debating whether to message her. On one hand, maybe she didn't know about the affair, and telling her would blow up her life in a way that couldn't be undone. On the other hand, she deserved to know her husband was spending their money on hotel rooms and jewelry for my wife, while she was probably at home believing his lies about working late. In the end, I decided ignorance might be bliss, but informed decisions are better, even when the information sucks worse than a vacuum cleaner convention. So I sent her a message. Nothing dramatic, just, Hi Erica. I know this is weird, but I'm married to one of your husband's coworkers, and I think we need to talk. This isn't spam, and I'm not crazy, or at least not yet. Can we meet for coffee? I hit send before I could overthink it, then stared at my phone like it was going to explode. The delivered notification popped up, then the seen notification, and then I watched those 3 little dots that mean someone's typing appear and disappear about 5 times before a message finally came through. Tomorrow. Murphy's Diner on 5th. 10 a.m. Come alone and bring proof of whatever you're about to tell me. Short, direct, no nonsense. I liked her already. Anyone who leads with "bring proof" is someone who's been lied to enough times to develop healthy skepticism. We were going to get along just fine. Murphy's Diner was one of those classic American establishments that looks like it hasn't been updated since 1987 and takes pride in that fact. Red vinyl booths with duct tape covering the cracks, a jukebox in the corner that probably only played songs from the 70s, and a waitress named Dolores who'd definitely seen some stuff and wasn't impressed by any of it. The coffee tasted like it had been brewed sometime during the Reagan administration and reheated every morning since. But it was cheap, and they didn't rush you, which made it the perfect location for the kind of conversation where you tell a stranger that both your spouses are garbage humans. I got there 15 minutes early because I'm the kind of person who shows up to appointments on time and then sits in the parking lot having an anxiety attack before going in. I'd brought my tablet loaded with all the screenshots, receipts, and photos I'd collected, organized chronologically because I'm nothing if not thorough when documenting the destruction of my marriage. I ordered coffee that tasted like regret and disappointment, which felt thematically appropriate, and waited. Erica walked in at exactly 10 a.m., which told me she was also the type who valued punctuality, and we locked eyes immediately in that way people do when they're meeting internet strangers and trying to figure out if they're about to have coffee or become a true crime podcast episode. She looked tired, more tired than her profile picture suggested, with dark circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide and the posture of someone who'd been carrying weight that wasn't physical for way too long. She slid into the booth across from me without introducing herself, just said, "Show me," which I respected. No small talk, no pleasantries, just straight to the evidence. I turned my tablet around and started with the restaurant receipts, watching her face carefully for reactions. She didn't flinch at first, just studied each image like she was reading a technical manual, nodding occasionally like things were clicking into place in her head. "The steakhouse," she said, pointing at one receipt. "He told me he was taking a client there. Said it was a business dinner for someone from out of town." Her voice was flat, emotionless in that way people get when they're trying not to break down in public. "What date was this?" "March 22nd, I said. My wife told me she was working late on a campaign pitch. Guess they were pitching something to each other." The joke fell flat, literally flat, like a pancake that had been sitting too long. But Erica's mouth twitched in what might have been the ghost of a smile. "He was supposed to be in Dallas that week," she said quietly, scrolling through more photos. When she got to the hotel receipt, she stopped, zooming in on the date. "This one. I remember this one. He called me from the hotel in Dallas to say goodnight to our daughter. I heard traffic in the background and thought it was weird. Because he said he was in his room. But She trailed off, and I watched her swallow hard, fighting against something. Tears, rage, maybe both. "Convinced yourself you were imagining things." I finished for her. "Yeah, I did that for about 6 months. Turns out our imaginations were just really good at pattern recognition." She looked up at me then, really looked at me, and I saw my own exhaustion reflected back. We were two people who'd been gaslit so thoroughly we'd started questioning our own sanity. And finding someone else who understood that without explanation was like discovering you weren't alone in a haunted house after all. There was another person there, equally confused about why the doors kept opening by themselves. When I showed her photos of Sabrina and Rick at that business dinner, I said, pulling up the image I'd taken from Sabrina's Instagram, the one she'd posted and quickly deleted, "Your husband told you he was where exactly?" Erica laughed, but it was the kind of laugh that's actually crying in disguise. "He said he was in Dallas, working late, closing a deal." She shook her head, and Dolores appeared with more terrible coffee that neither of us wanted, but both of us needed. "I'm such an idiot." "You're not an idiot," I said, and I meant it. "You're just someone who trusted the person you married. That's not stupid. That's how it's supposed to work. They're the idiots for throwing it away." I paused, stirring sugar into coffee I wasn't going to drink. "And my wife told me she was closing deals. Turns out she was just opening them. Wrong kind of deals entirely." That got a Real laugh, small but genuine, and we both sat there for a moment appreciating the absurdity of our situation. Two people who'd never met, connected by the fact that our spouses had found each other before we did. It was like a really depressing version of a romantic comedy, except nobody was learning valuable lessons about love and the only happy ending involved paperwork and lawyers. So what now? Erica asked, wrapping her hands around her coffee mug like it was the only solid thing in a world that had gone liquid. Do we confront them? Get lawyers? Post it on Facebook. She said that last part like a joke, but I could tell part of her was seriously considering it. Now, I said, we don't plan revenge out loud because that seems legally problematic. But we also don't need to. Sometimes the universe handles these things itself. Sometimes people who think they're getting away with something discover that karma has Wi-Fi, and it's been tracking them the whole time. We exchanged numbers, promised to keep each other updated, and sat there for another hour drinking bad coffee and trading stories about the red flags we'd ignored, the lies we believed, and the futures we'd imagined that now existed only as cautionary tales. We didn't plan anything specific that day, didn't need to. Just knowing someone else understood, someone else had receipts and screenshots, and that same sick feeling in their stomach when their spouse said they were working late, that was enough. For now. There's an old saying about keeping your friends close and your enemies closer, but nobody tells you what to do when your enemy is also the person you share a bathroom with and who keeps stealing your phone charger. The answer, I discovered, is to become the world's greatest actor while simultaneously executing the kind of strategic planning that would make military generals nod with approval. I'm talking full method acting, Daniel Day-Lewis level commitment to the role of husband who definitely doesn't know his wife is cheating and definitely isn't planning anything. It started the Monday after my coffee meeting with Erica when I showed up at home with flowers. Not just any flowers. I went to that expensive florist downtown that Sabrina always pointed at wistfully when we drove past. The one that charges $30 for roses that'll die in a week, just like the cheaper ones, but somehow look more sophisticated while doing it. I walked through the door at 6 p.m. holding this massive bouquet of purple and white flowers that I couldn't name if my life depended on it, and the look on Sabrina's face was priceless. Confusion, suspicion, and a hint of fear all mixed together like a cocktail of emotions she wasn't prepared to drink. "What's this for?" she asked, taking the flowers like they might explode. Which, metaphorically speaking, they kind of were going to, just not yet. I'd timed the detonation for later. "Does a man need a reason to buy his wife flowers?" I said, kissing her cheek with the enthusiasm of a husband in a commercial for allergy medication. "I just wanted to remind you that I appreciate you. All those late nights you've been working, all the effort you put into your career, I don't say it enough, but I'm proud of you, babe." The word babe came out smooth as butter, no hint of the sarcasm I was drowning in internally. I should have been a politician. Or a con artist. Apparently, I had a real talent for lying when properly motivated by betrayal. She actually teared up, stood there in our kitchen holding $29 worth of dying plant matter, and got misty-eyed like I'd just proposed again instead of setting the stage for the greatest gotcha moment since Maury Povich started doing paternity tests on daytime television. "That's really sweet, Mark. I've been feeling kind of disconnected from you lately, and this means a lot." The irony of her saying we'd been disconnected while she was actively connecting with Rick in hotel rooms across the city wasn't lost on me, but I just smiled and suggested we order her favorite Thai food for dinner. For the next 2 weeks, I was husband of the year material. I cooked dinner when she worked late, which was often, shockingly, and never once asked suspicious questions about why she needed to work late so frequently or why her idea of business casual apparently included lingerie I'd never seen before. I complimented her new haircut, the one she got without mentioning it beforehand, and claimed she'd just decided to do spontaneously, even though I'd found a text from Rick saying he loved her hair longer but was excited to see the change. I even pretended to care about her team retreat, asked questions about the itinerary, nodded enthusiastically when she explained the trust-building exercises they'd be doing. Real trust building would have been not sleeping with her coworker, but I kept that observation to myself. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, I was executing what I like to call Operation Financial Independence, which sounds better than Operation Make Sure My Cheating Wife Can't Bankrupt Me in the Divorce. I'd consulted with a lawyer, a sharp woman named Patricia Chun who'd taken one look at my evidence folder and actually said, "Oh honey," in a tone that was equal parts sympathy and professional excitement. Turns out, documentation is everything in divorce proceedings, and I had enough documentation to wallpaper our bedroom. Not that I would, because I was planning to keep the bedroom, but you get the idea. Patricia helped me understand that in our state, anything I did with assets before filing for divorce needed to be careful, strategic, and most importantly, legal. So I didn't empty our joint accounts like some kind of movie villain. I slowly, methodically, transferred my half plus a bit extra to cover the money she'd been spending on her extracurricular activities. I changed passwords on accounts that were primarily mine, switched the utilities into my name alone, and this was the big one. I called in a favor from my real estate attorney buddy, Dave, who helped me discover that our house was actually only in my name because of some paperwork quirk from when we'd bought it, and Sabrina had terrible credit at the time. She'd been making the mortgage payments with me, sure, but legally speaking, the house was mine. I'd forgotten about this detail because who remembers their mortgage paperwork specifics from 6 years ago? But Dave remembered, bless him, and after reviewing everything confirmed that unless Sabrina could prove she'd contributed significantly to the down payment, which she hadn't, because her parents had given us money as a wedding gift that went into my account first, she didn't have automatic claim to half the house. Was this morally gray? Maybe. Did I care at this point? Absolutely not. She wanted to play games. I'd learned the rulebook and discovered I was better at it than she was. The really beautiful part was watching her relax. Every compliment I gave her, every dinner I cooked, every time I kissed her goodnight without asking where she'd really been, she loosened up a little more. Started to believe she was getting away with it, that I was just the oblivious husband who asked no questions and threatened no consequences. She got comfortable, and comfortable people make mistakes. They get sloppy. They stop covering their tracks as carefully. They schedule romantic getaways on their work calendar that syncs to the shared iPad they forgot about. Which is how I discovered her next business trip. Thursday morning, I was checking our grocery list on the iPad, because I'd actually started doing the grocery shopping too, really leaning into this perfect husband thing, when a calendar notification popped up. Phoenix Conference, 3 days. The dates were next weekend, Friday through Sunday, and the location was listed as the Fairmont Scottsdale. I did what any reasonable person would do. I Googled it. 5-star resort, spa services, golf course, romantic dinner options overlooking the desert. Real business conference vibes. Definitely not the kind of place you go to attend PowerPoint presentations about marketing strategies. I wrote the dates down, closed the iPad, and went to work whistling. Actually whistling, like some kind of cartoon character who'd just hatched a plan. My employees thought I'd lost my mind. "Boss, you okay?" Tommy asked, watching me reorganize the tool wall while humming. "You're being weird. Like, weirder than usual." "Tommy, my friend," I said, hanging up a wrench with the precision of a man who'd found his purpose. "I'm better than okay. I'm great. I'm phenomenal. I'm living my best life." He backed away slowly, probably wondering if I'd been drinking, but I didn't care. I had a plan forming, and it was beautiful in its simplicity. That evening, Sabrina brought up the Phoenix trip over dinner, leftover Thai food because I was still playing the supportive husband card. "So, I have to go to Phoenix next weekend," she said, trying to sound annoyed about it like business travel was such a burden and not a convenient excuse to spend 3 days with her boyfriend at a luxury resort. "It's a conference about digital marketing trends. Mandatory attendance, super boring, but you know how it is." I nodded sympathetically, reaching across the table to squeeze her hand like I wasn't internally planning her downfall. "That's tough, babe. But hey, at least Phoenix is beautiful this time of year. You should try to enjoy it between sessions. Maybe get a spa treatment or something. Expense it to the company." I smiled, all innocence and support. "You work so hard. You deserve a little relaxation." She smiled back, and I could see the relief in her eyes. Permission granted, guilt absolved, husband successfully deceived. "You're the best, you know that? Some guys would be upset about their wife traveling so much for work, but you just get it. You understand how important my career is to me." "I understand a lot of things," I said, which was the truest statement I'd made in weeks. "I just want you to be happy, Sabrina. Whatever makes you happy." The double meaning sailed right over her head like a paper airplane made of irony. After dinner, while she was upstairs packing, already packing 5 days early, because apparently she was that excited about this conference, I pulled out my laptop and booked a flight. Same airline, same flight number, same destination, different name on the ticket because I'm listed as Mark Anthony Castellano on my license, and I bought the ticket as M.A. Castellano, which wouldn't ping any recognition if she somehow checked the passenger manifest. which she wouldn't because she thought I was an idiot. Friday morning to Sunday evening, Phoenix, Arizona. I booked a room at a Holiday Inn about 10 minutes from her fancy resort because I'm practical and also because the Fairmont would have bankrupted me and I needed to save money for lawyer fees. I rented a car, packed a bag with my camera, the good one I used for taking pictures of custom paint jobs at the shop, with the zoom lens that could photograph a license plate from across a parking lot. And I felt, for the first time in months, like I had control over something. The morning she left for the airport, I drove her. Loaded her suitcase in the trunk. Noticed she'd packed the black dress Rick had mentioned in his email, real subtle there, and kissed her goodbye at departures. Have fun at your conference, I said, pulling her close like a loving husband would. Don't forget to expense the champagne. You've earned it. She laughed, actually laughed, kissed me back, and walked into the airport with her rolling suitcase and her lies, completely unaware that in approximately 6 hours, I'd be on a plane right behind her. Different row, same destination, unified purpose. Watching her entire double life collapse in real time with professional quality photographic evidence. She smiled at me through the airport window, waving one last time before disappearing into the crowd. That smile, God, that smile. It was the smile of someone who thought they'd won, who believed they were getting away with everything, who had no idea the trap was already set and they were walking right into it. I smiled back, waved, got in my truck, and drove home to finish packing. Game on, Sabrina. Game on. There's something surreal about sitting 4 rows behind your wife on a plane while she's heading to meet her lover, and she has absolutely no idea you're there. It's like being a ghost, except instead of haunting a mansion, you're haunting seat 17B in economy class, drinking a $7 ginger ale, and contemplating whether the peanuts they just handed you are worth the effort of opening the package. The answer is no, but I opened them anyway because I needed something to do with my hands besides grip my phone like I was trying to strangle it. Sabrina was in seat 13C, window seat, because she always insisted on window seats, claimed the aisle gave her anxiety about people bumping her when they walked past, which I'd always thought was a weird thing to be anxious about, but now realized was probably just her being high maintenance about everything. She'd boarded before me, walking down that narrow airplane aisle with her carry-on and her neck pillow, and her complete confidence that her husband was currently at home watching ESPN and eating chips for dinner like the oblivious idiot she thought I was. I'd waited until the final boarding call to get on, wearing a baseball cap pulled low and sunglasses even though we were indoors, looking like either a celebrity trying to go incognito or a divorced dad going through a midlife crisis. Could have been either, honestly. The flight attendant doing the safety demonstration could have been speaking ancient Greek for all I absorbed. Something about exits and flotation devices and putting your own mask on first, which felt like a metaphor for my entire marriage. I'd been so busy making sure Sabrina was okay that I'd forgotten to secure my own oxygen supply, and now we were both crashing. Except I had a parachute, and she had no idea the ground was coming up fast. I spent the first 20 minutes of the flight pretending to read a Sky Mall magazine from 2019 that someone had left in the seat pocket, looking at products nobody needs like a hot dog toaster and a garden gnome that's also a sprinkler, while occasionally glancing up to see the back of Sabrina's head 4 rows ahead. She was texting someone. I could see the glow of her phone screen reflected in the window, and I would have bet my entire tool collection that it was Rick, probably something gross and romantic about how excited she was to see him. The thought made me want to throw my peanuts at her head, but that seemed like the kind of behavior that gets you on a no-fly list, and I needed to maintain my cover as just some random passenger who definitely isn't stalking his cheating wife. The guy next to me, middle-aged, balding, wearing a polo shirt with a corporate logo I didn't recognize, tried to make small talk about 20 minutes into the flight. Business or pleasure? He asked, the universal airplane conversation starter that I'm pretty sure is taught in some secret manual they give you when you turn 35. Little bit of both, I said, which was accurate. The business of catching my wife cheating was definitely giving me pleasure, in a dark, vindictive sort of way that probably meant I should add more therapy sessions to my post-divorce budget. Sales conference, he sighed. Like this explained everything about his life choices and why he looked vaguely dead inside. Third one this quarter. My wife thinks I'm having an affair with all these trips. He laughed, oblivious to the irony bomb he'd just dropped into my lap. I keep telling her, honey, if I was having an affair, I'd pick somewhere more exciting than Phoenix. I nearly choked on my ginger ale. Yeah, I managed. That would be pretty stupid. Having an affair in Phoenix. Real stupid. I glanced at Sabrina's head, still 4 rows up, still glowing from her phone screen. People who do that probably deserve whatever's coming to them. The rest of the flight passed in a strange blur of me pretending to sleep while actually watching Sabrina like a creepy surveillance hawk, listening to the engine noise and the crying baby in row 9 and thinking about how my life had become an episode of a reality show I never auditioned for. When we started our descent, I felt my stomach drop, not from the altitude change, but from the realization that this was really happening. I was really about to watch my wife meet her boyfriend at the airport. I was really about to document the evidence that would end my marriage. There was no going back from this, no pretending I didn't know, no more playing the oblivious husband. Good. I was tired of playing that role anyway. The reviews were terrible and the pay was worse. We landed with that weird, bumpy touchdown that makes everyone hold their breath like we're surprised the plane actually made it. And then came the part I'd been dreading. The awkward shuffle of everyone standing up at once to grab their bags from the overhead compartments even though the door isn't even open yet, and we're all just going to stand there hunched over like a convention of the world's most impatient hunchbacks. I stayed seated, let the rows ahead of me clear out, watched Sabrina grab her bag, the expensive one I'd bought her for Christmas last year, which felt like another small betrayal in a list of increasingly larger ones, and walk off the plane without once looking back. I followed at a distance, keeping at least 15 people between us as we walked through the terminal. Phoenix Sky Harbor Airport is huge, which worked in my favor. Lots of crowds to blend into, lots of corners to lurk behind like a noir detective, except, instead of a fedora, I was wearing a Phoenix Suns cap I'd bought specifically for this trip to help blend in with the locals. I watched her check her phone, smile at whatever message she'd received, and speed up her pace toward baggage claim. And that's where I saw him. Rick Henderson, in the flesh, standing by the baggage carousel like he was waiting for the love of his life instead of someone else's wife. He was taller than I'd expected from his Facebook photos, maybe 6'2", with that kind of gym fit build that comes from having a personal trainer and enough free time to actually use them. He wore khakis and a button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up, looking like he'd stepped out of a Banana Republic catalog. And his face lit up when he saw Sabrina in a way that made me want to punch him and also maybe cry a little bit, because that's how he used to look at me. Back when we were happy, back before everything got complicated and cold. She practically ran to him. Actually ran. Her heels clicking on the airport floor like some kind of romantic movie scene, except the genre was more psychological thriller than romantic comedy. And he caught her in a hug that lifted her off the ground. They kissed, right there in baggage claim. The kind of kiss that makes other people look away awkwardly because it's too intimate for public space. The kind of kiss I hadn't gotten from her in probably 2 years. He spun her around. She laughed, and I stood 20 feet away behind a support column taking pictures with my phone like a private investigator, except sadder, because I wasn't getting paid for this, just traumatized. My hands were shaking, I realized. Actually trembling like I'd had too much coffee. Except I hadn't had any coffee. Just airline ginger ale and a growing sense of rage that felt like it was going to crack my chest open from the inside. I took a breath, deep, steady, the kind they teach you in anger management classes I'd never attended but probably should have, and kept photographing. Wide shots, close-ups, different angles. Professional quality documentation of my marriage ending in Terminal 4 of Phoenix Sky Harbor International Airport. They collected their bags. Rick had apparently packed light, just to carry on, while Sabrina waited for her checked luggage like she was planning to stay a while, and walked toward the exit holding hands. Holding hands. Like teenagers. Like people who weren't actively destroying 2 marriages, and probably Rick's career once his company found out he was sleeping with a colleague. I followed them to the parking garage, watched Rick open the passenger door of a rented Mercedes, because of course he rented a Mercedes, probably on the company card, and kept my distance as they drove out. I'd already arranged my own rental, a basic sedan that screamed forgettable and cost about 1/10 of what Rick's probably did. I picked it up, programmed the Fairmont Scottsdale into my GPS even though I'd already memorized the route, and drove the 25 minutes to the resort, maintaining a safe following distance like I'd learned from watching too many cop shows during my sleepless nights of evidence gathering. The Fairmont was exactly as advertised, sprawling, luxurious, The kind of place where even the landscaping probably cost more than my annual salary. Palm trees, fountains, valet parking, the works. I watched from the visitor lot as Rick and Sabrina checked in, as the bellhop took their bags, as Rick signed something at the front desk. I zoomed in with my camera, the good one now, the real equipment, and caught the name on the registration, Mr. and Mrs. Harris. Harris. They'd picked Harris. Not even creative enough to come up with something original. Just generic fake married couple name number 3 on the list of names people use when they're cheating. The audacity was almost impressive, except it wasn't. It was just sad and predictable and perfectly in character for two people who thought they were being clever when really they were just being obvious. I took approximately 47 photos. I know because I counted later, lying in my budget hotel room eating pizza I'd ordered from a place that definitely wasn't on any Best of Phoenix lists. 47 pieces of evidence, each one clearer than the last. Rick and Sabrina entering the hotel. Rick and Sabrina at check-in. Rick's hand on the small of her back. Her leaning into him like he was the only person in the world. The bellhop leading them toward what I'd later learn was the honeymoon suite, because apparently regular adultery wasn't enough. It had to be luxury adultery. I sat in my rental car in that parking lot for probably 30 minutes after they'd gone inside, just staring at my camera's display screen, scrolling through the photos like they were going to change if I looked at them enough times. They didn't change. They just stayed there, permanent and damning, and exactly what I'd come here to find. Then I did what any reasonable person in my situation would do. I opened a new text message to Erica Henderson, attached all 47 photos, and hit send. No caption needed. The picture said everything. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because I was anxious or having second thoughts. Those would have required me to have some shred of emotional investment left in this dumpster fire of a marriage. But because the Holiday Inn's mattress had that specific quality of being somehow too soft and too hard at the same time, like sleeping on a marshmallow filled with rocks. Also, the people in the room next door were having what sounded like either incredibly athletic intimate relations or possibly moving furniture at 2 in the morning. Either way, it was loud, rhythmic, and a real testament to their stamina and my misery. So by 6 a.m., I gave up on sleep entirely, took a shower in a bathroom that was clean but depressing in that universal budget hotel way where everything is beige and smells vaguely of industrial cleaning products, and headed down to the lobby. The complimentary breakfast was exactly what you'd expect. Watery orange juice, coffee that tasted like it was brewed with water filtered through an old sock, and a waffle maker that 3 people were standing around watching like it was going to perform a magic trick. I grabbed coffee in a styrofoam cup that immediately burned my hand, proving that the laws of thermodynamics still applied even when your life was falling apart, and sat in the lobby pretending to read USA Today while actually scrolling through my camera roll from yesterday. The photos were good. Really good. I'm talking National Geographic quality documentation of infidelity. Sharp focus, good lighting, perfect composition of 2 people who deserved each other checking into a hotel under a fake name. I'd already uploaded them all to 3 different cloud services because I'm paranoid about technology failing at crucial moments, and I'd sent copies to Patricia, my lawyer, who'd responded at 11 p.m. Apparently divorce attorneys don't sleep either, with a message that just said, "Holy shit, this is bulletproof." Around 7:30, I decided to relocate my surveillance operation to somewhere with better coffee and possibly edible food. There was a cafe about 5 minutes from the Fairmont that had decent Yelp reviews and, more importantly, a clear view of the resort's main entrance. I'm not proud of the fact that I'd scouted this location on Google Maps before the trip, but I'm also not ashamed because preparation is the difference between success and looking like an idiot, and I'd spent enough time looking like an idiot for one marriage. The cafe was called Desert Bloom, which sounded like either a coffee shop or a retirement community, but it turned out to be actually nice. Local art on the walls, baristas who looked like they genuinely enjoyed their jobs instead of contemplating murder-suicide, and coffee that tasted like actual coffee instead of what coffee's distant cousin might taste like after a bad breakup. I ordered something complicated with oat milk and an extra shot of espresso because if I was going to confront my wife about her affair, I wanted to be properly caffeinated for it. I sat at a table by the window, positioned so I could see the Fairmont's entrance, but also look like I was just a normal person enjoying breakfast and not a man orchestrating the downfall of his marriage with the precision of a military operation. I ordered avocado toast because I was in a trendy cafe and apparently that's legally required, and scrolled through my phone like an artist admiring his gallery of revenge. Each photo was a masterpiece of betrayal, a perfect snapshot of two people who thought they were getting away with something. The composition on the check-in photo was particularly nice. You could see both their faces clearly, plus the signature on the registration form. Rick had nice handwriting for someone whose moral compass was apparently broken. Around 9 a.m., my phone buzzed with a text from Erica. Send him screenshots. He's calling me, but I'm not answering. How you holding up? I responded with a thumbs up emoji because words felt like too much effort, and also because I wasn't entirely sure how I was holding up. On one hand, I felt vindicated, justified, like I'd finally proven I wasn't crazy. On the other hand, my wife was 100 yards away probably having breakfast with her boyfriend, and I was eating overpriced toast alone while planning the most awkward confrontation since someone invented family Thanksgiving dinners. I was contemplating ordering more coffee, my third cup, which was probably too beyond what doctors recommend, but significantly fewer than what divorce lawyers probably required, when I saw her. Sabrina, walking through the Fairmont lobby visible through the resort's glass doors, moving fast with her phone pressed to her ear and her face doing that thing it did when she was trying very hard not to panic in public. Her free hand was gesturing wildly, the universal sign language for everything is going horribly wrong, and I'm pretending I have it under control. I watched her pace back and forth in the lobby for maybe 2 minutes, still on the phone, her expression cycling through what I can only describe as the 5 stages of oh shit. Then she hung up, stood there for a second looking at her phone like it had personally betrayed her, ironic, considering, and started walking. Not back toward the elevators where I assumed her room was, but toward the exit, toward the cafe, toward me. Now, I'd imagine this confrontation going several different ways. In one version, I dramatically revealed myself at dinner while they were eating, maybe even had the waiter bring over divorce papers with dessert. In another, I waited until they were checking out and handed her an envelope in front of Rick like I was serving a subpoena in a legal drama. But watching her storm toward my location with her phone in a death grip and her face pale under what was probably expensive resort makeup, I realized the universe had its own timeline, and I was just along for the ride. She walked into Desert Bloom like a woman on a mission, scanning the cafe with the intensity of someone looking for either answers or an escape route. When her eyes landed on me, sitting there with my avocado toast and my coffee and my baseball cap like I belonged there, she froze. Actually froze, mid-step, like someone had hit pause on the remote control of her life. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again like a fish trying to remember how breathing worked. Mark? She said my name like it was a question, like maybe if she questioned it hard enough I'd turn out to be someone else, some stranger who just happened to look exactly like her husband sitting in a Phoenix cafe at 9 in the morning. Mark, what are you doing here? I took a sip of my coffee, nice and slow, savoring both the expensive oat milk and the moment. Oh, you know, I said casually, like I'd just run into her at the grocery store instead of caught her mid-affair in another state. Just thought I'd try the lobster. Everyone's been raving about it. Figured I'd come see what all the fuss was about. Her face went through several color changes, red to white to possibly green, and I could see her brain working overtime trying to figure out what was happening, how I knew, what I knew, and most importantly, how much trouble she was in. Spoiler alert, all the trouble. Every single bit of it. Her phone buzzed in her hand, loud enough that I could hear it from 6 feet away. She glanced down at the screen, and I watched all the blood drain from her face like someone had opened a tap. Even from my angle, I could see the message preview. Hope you two enjoyed your stay. Erica had perfect timing. I made a mental note to send her a fruit basket or maybe just split custody of our collective trauma. What did you do? Sabrina's voice came out strangled, barely above a whisper, and she looked at me with something between horror and disbelief. Mark, what did you do? I grinned. Couldn't help it. Really, the moment was too perfect, and set down my coffee with the deliberate care of someone who'd waited months for this exact conversation. Nothing much. Just finally gave you the transparency you always said we needed. You know, that whole communication is key to a healthy relationship thing you kept bringing up in therapy? Turns out you were right. Communication is important. So I communicated with Rick's wife, shared some photos from my Phoenix vacation, really opened up about my feelings and experiences. Very therapeutic, actually. She dropped into the chair across from me, didn't pull it out, didn't ask permission, just collapsed like her legs had stopped working, and stared at me with eyes that were starting to fill with tears. You followed me here? You've been watching us? That's crazy, Mark. That's stalker behavior. Stalker behavior. I repeated, like I was testing out the words to see how they tasted. Interesting take. I'd call it evidence gathering, or maybe due diligence, or, here's a fun one, confirming that my wife is a lying cheater who's been spending our money on hotel rooms with her coworker. But sure, let's call me the crazy one. That's definitely the problem here. I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms. How's Rick, by the way? He getting similar calls from his wife? Or is this just affecting you so far? Her phone buzzed again. And again. The messages were probably piling up. Erica had a lot to say, I imagined, and Rick was probably having his own meltdown in whatever luxury suite they'd charged to his credit card. Sabrina looked at her phone like it was a snake, then at me like I was the one who'd brought the snake to breakfast. This isn't how I wanted you to find out, she said finally, which might have been the most honest thing she'd said to me in months, and also possibly the dumbest. I was going to tell you. Eventually. When the time was right. Oh, absolutely, I said, nodding sagely. Nothing says right time like checking into a hotel under a fake name for a romantic weekend. That's definitely when most people come clean about their affairs. Classic timing. Right, because that's the real issue here. My timing in finding out, not your timing in deciding to cheat. I picked up my coffee again, more for something to do with my hands than because I actually wanted more caffeine at this point. My heart was already racing like I'd mainlined espresso straight into my veins. So let's talk about timing. You've been seeing Rick for what, 6 months? 7? I've got receipts going back to March, so at least 7 months. That's a lot of not the right time to tell your husband you're screwing your coworker. She flinched at the word screwing, which was rich considering she'd been doing exactly that in a 5-star resort, while I slept on a mattress that felt like it was stuffed with regret and broken springs. It wasn't like that. It just happened. We didn't plan it. Things with us were so bad. Mark and Rick was there, and he listened and... Oh, he listened. I interrupted, because I'd heard enough of this particular excuse in every cheating story ever told, and I wasn't about to sit through the director's cut. That's beautiful. Really touching. Your husband. The guy working 60-hour weeks to keep his business afloat. The guy who still cooked you dinner and bought you flowers and pretended not to notice when you came home smelling like another man's cologne. He didn't listen enough. But Rick with his expense account and his hotel rooms and his jewelry from Tiffany's, he listened. What a gentleman. What a hero. Someone should write a romance novel about you too, except it would get shelved in the fiction section under delusional garbage. Tears were streaming down her face now, and part of me, a small, stupid part that remembered when I actually loved this woman, felt bad about that. But the larger part, the part that had spent months being gaslit and lied to and made to feel crazy for trusting my own instincts, felt absolutely nothing. Or maybe felt everything, and it all just averaged out to a cold, calculated calm that probably should have scared me, but instead felt like the first honest emotion I'd experienced in ages. I never meant to hurt you, she said, which is what people always say when they've been hurting you intentionally for months and finally got caught. I know that sounds stupid, but I didn't. I love you, Mark. I do. This thing with Rick, it's different. It's exciting and new and convenient, I finished. And expensive, considering you've been using our joint account to fund it. Yeah, I noticed that too. All those team-building dinners and client meetings that cost $400 a pop. I've got a spreadsheet, Sabrina. Color-coded. It's very thorough. Patricia, my lawyer, was extremely impressed with my organizational skills. Said it was some of the best documentation she'd seen in 15 years of practice. So thanks for that, I guess. You helped me discover I have a real talent for forensic accounting. Her face somehow got paler, which I didn't think was physically possible, but apparently shock can do amazing things to human circulation. You have a lawyer already? You've been planning this. Planning. I laughed, and it came out harsh enough that the barista looked over with concern. I lowered my voice, leaned forward across the table. Sabrina, I haven't been planning anything. I've been reacting. I've been responding. I've been doing what any normal person does when they realize their spouse is cheating, gathering evidence, protecting my assets, and making sure that when this inevitably falls apart, I'm not the one left holding the bag. You planned this. You and Rick planned this whole elaborate setup with your fake business trips and your secret phone calls and your Mr. and Mrs. Harris routine. I just documented it. She reached across the table like she was going to grab my hand, thought better of it halfway through, and pulled back. We can fix this. We can go to therapy, work through it. People recover from affairs all the time. We can. We can get divorced, I said flatly, pulling an envelope from my jacket pocket and sliding it across the table between my half-eaten avocado toast and her mounting horror. Here, I brought you something. Think of it as a souvenir from Phoenix. A little memento of our time apart. She stared at the envelope like it might bite her. What is this? Freedom, I said, echoing the same line I'd use a month from now when this was all finally over and I could breathe again. Open it. Her hands shook as she picked up the envelope, and I watched her slide out the papers inside with the kind of morbid fascination you have when watching a car crash in slow motion. You know it's going to be bad, but you can't look away. The papers were divorce documents, professionally printed, legally binding, and here's the beautiful part, already signed. I don't understand, she said, scanning the pages with growing confusion and panic. These are signed. By both of us. When did I? She stopped, her eyes going wide as memory apparently kicked in. The tax forms. You said you needed me to sign tax forms 4 months ago. I needed you to sign documents, I corrected. I may have been vague about which documents. But hey, you always said I should communicate more clearly. And look at me now, being super clear. These are divorce papers, Sabrina. You signed them in June. They're notarized, witnessed, and according to Patricia, completely legally binding in our state. Congratulations, you've been efficiently processing your own divorce for months and didn't even know it. That's not legal. Her voice rose enough that other cafe patrons were definitely staring now, but I didn't care and apparently neither did she. You can't trick someone into signing divorce papers. That's fraud or coercion or… Actually, I said, pulling out my phone and opening a voice memo app that showed a recording dated June 15th. It's completely legal as long as the person signing had the mental capacity to understand what they were signing and did so of their own free will. Which you did, because I recorded our conversation that day. You want to hear it? You were in a great mood, just got a promotion at work, or at least that's what you told me. Though now I'm wondering if that was code for something else. And you literally said, and I quote, "Whatever you need me to sign, babe, just leave it on the counter and I'll take care of it." Then you signed without reading it. Which, by the way, Patricia says is on you, not me. Always read before you sign, Sabrina. That's like basic adulting. She looked like she was going to be sick. Actually sick, the kind where you can see someone's body deciding whether to commit to the nausea or not. You can't do this. The house, the accounts, everything we built together. The house is in my name, I said, really enjoying this part because I'd been waiting months to see her face when she realized how thoroughly she'd been outmaneuvered. Remember when we bought it and your credit was terrible because of all those student loans and credit card debt? Yeah, we put everything in my name. You've been contributing to the mortgage, sure, but legally speaking, it's my house. The accounts are split. I moved my half plus what you spend on your extracurricular activities with Rick. Your car is yours, my truck is mine, and the only thing we really need to divide is the furniture, which honestly, you can have most of it. I never liked that couch anyway. Her phone started ringing. Rick's name flashing on the screen with a photo of the two of them that she'd apparently saved as his contact picture, which was bold considering we had a shared iCloud account that she'd apparently forgotten about. She hit decline, but it immediately started ringing again. I need to take this, she said, standing up so fast her chair scraped against the floor with a sound like nails on a chalkboard. Sure, go ahead, I said generously, like I was giving her permission to answer her own phone. Tell Rick I said hi. Oh, and that his wife has already contacted his company's HR department with screenshots of his expense reports. Apparently, those luxury dinners and hotel rooms weren't actually approved business expenses, and his boss is very interested in discussing his creative accounting. Might want to give him a heads up about that. She looked at me like I'd just told her I'd burned down her house with her dog inside. You didn't. I didn't, I confirmed. Erica did. She's surprisingly resourceful when motivated by betrayal. We've been comparing notes. It's been very therapeutic. You two should try couples therapy. Oh wait, you can't, because Rick's probably going to be divorced and unemployed by the end of the week. Bad timing on that promotion he was supposedly up for. The phone kept ringing. She kept staring at me like I'd transformed into someone she didn't recognize, which was fair because I'd spent 6 months not recognizing the woman I'd married while she lied to my face over pancakes and pretended everything was fine. I have to go, she said finally, her voice hollow. We're not done talking about this. Actually, we are, I said, gesturing to the divorce papers still sitting on the table between us. That's literally the legal definition of being done. But hey, your lawyer can call my lawyer and they can talk about it. That's what lawyers are for. Patricia's very good, by the way. Comes highly recommended by 3 of my customers who've been through divorces. All of them said she's a shark in the courtroom and a genuinely nice person in consultation. You should probably get a lawyer too. A good one. You're going to need it. She grabbed the papers, shoved them back in the envelope with shaking hands, and walked out of Desert Bloom without another word. I watched her through the window as she stood on the sidewalk outside, phone pressed to her ear, gesturing wildly while presumably talking to Rick and trying to explain how her husband had just destroyed both their lives over avocado toast and expensive coffee. I sat there for another 20 minutes, finished my breakfast, ordered one more coffee because why not, and thought about how I'd imagined this moment would feel. I'd expected vindication, triumph, maybe even joy. What I felt instead was tired. Just bone deep, exhausted, tired. Not sad, not angry, just done. Finished. Ready to close this chapter and move on to whatever came next. My phone buzzed with a text from Erica. Rick just called me crying. Crying. This is the best day ever. Thank you for existing. I smiled, texted back. Same to you. Coffee next week. Absolutely. First round's on me. I left a generous tip for the barista who'd witnessed what was probably the most dramatic breakfast conversation she'd seen all week, walked out into the Phoenix sun that was already brutally hot at 10 a.m., and drove back to my hotel to pack. My flight home was that evening, and I had a business to run, a house to enjoy in peace, and a divorce to finalize. Sabrina could have Phoenix, the Fairmont, and Rick. I was going home. The envelope I'd handed Sabrina in that Phoenix cafe wasn't just symbolic. It was legally binding, notarized, and according to Patricia, about as airtight as divorce paperwork gets. See, for months earlier, I told Sabrina I needed her signature on some tax documents that required both our signatures for our joint filing. She'd been in a rush, heading out to another one of her late work nights, and had barely glanced at the papers before signing her name with that expensive pen her parents gave her for Christmas. What she'd actually signed were divorce papers. Blank ones, sure, but with all the legal language intact and her signature right there on the dotted line. Patricia had helped me fill in the rest later, division of assets, which was easy since everything was basically already separate, in terms that heavily favored me because, well, I had evidence of adultery and she had expensive mistakes. This isn't fair. Sabrina screamed when her lawyer finally explained what had happened. Neither is pretending to be married while auditioning for your own romance novel. I replied. The locks were already changed. Her name was off the accounts. And corporate ethics? They handled the rest. A month later, the house was quiet. Peaceful quiet, not lonely quiet, which is a distinction I'd learned to appreciate somewhere between changing the locks and realizing I could eat cereal for dinner without judgment. I'd started going to a cafe after work. That's where I met Lucy, a waitress with a crooked smile and laugh that made bad days survivable. She didn't know my story, didn't ask, just poured coffee and said, "You look like a man who needs pancakes." She wasn't wrong. Sabrina called once, crying. Rick dumped her. She was moving into a studio apartment. I told her, "You always wanted something minimalist." We both laughed. Well, I did. Now when people ask what happened to my marriage, I say, my wife diversified her portfolio, unfortunately, emotionally and physically. Sitting on my porch, watching the sunset, I realized revenge doesn't always need fire. Sometimes it just needs Wi-Fi, patience, and a good sense of humor. Sometimes it needs a lawyer named Patricia and a betrayed spouse named Erica who becomes your unlikely friend. Sometimes karma doesn't strike like lightning. Sometimes it just quietly changes the locks while you're busy living your best life. And honestly, That's even better.